Hey guys, tonight we begin with the life as a follower of Attila the Hun, a world of blistered saddles, boiled meat, and smoke curling from tents pitched in mud. Far from the terrifying legends etched by Roman scribes, these were days of endless riding, waking to frost-bitten leather, and squinting at foreign cities through the steam of your own breath. Glory, if it came at all, was buried beneath blisters and ash. So while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel is the cold. It seeps in through the seams of your cloak, slips past the folds of your worn tunic, and settles like a damp fog in your joints. The wind, thin and sharp, stirs the brittle grass outside, but inside your tent, the air smells of sour leather, stale smoke, and the faintest trace of wet horse. Someone's already snoring near the flap, limbs tangled in fur blankets that smell like last week's mutton. You shift your legs and feel the itch. It's there again, raw and relentless. The saddle rash from yesterday's ride hasn't healed, and your thigh feels like it's been sandpapered by a particularly vengeful demon. But Attila rides at dawn, and your skin doesn't get a vote. Your horse is already awake, of course. You hear it outside, stomping the ground with the kind of impatience that says, "Hurry up, I've got freezing wind to trot through." You reach for your boots, which are damp and crusted with whatever mystery sludge you waded through last night. The laces are stiff, the leather warped from too many river crossings, and they smell a bit like boiled onions and regret. As you fumble them on, your fingers numb in the chill, you notice the frost pattern on the inside of the tent fabric, little jagged lines like ghost roads leading nowhere. They tremble every time the wind sighs across the plain. Someone mumbles beside you. You glance over and see Garrett, who once claimed to have kissed a Roman noblewoman, but also thought vinegar cured arrow wounds. He's chewing on something, probably dried meat, or maybe his sleeve. Either way, he's already muttering about the old signs in the sky and how the moon looked strange last night. You've heard this one before. It always ends with him predicting a victorious raid or total annihilation, depending on how his breakfast sits. The camp is coming alive now. You hear hooves stamping in the frost, metal clinking as someone sharpens a blade too early to be polite about it, and the guttural chatter of men arguing over who stole whose rabbit jerky. You step outside, and the wind hits you full in the face, icy, aggressive, and scented with smoke, manure, and human tension. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the sky is beginning to bleach around the edges, pale and shivering like cold milk. Shadows stretch long across the steppe, blurring men and beasts into one restless shape. Your horse, a shaggy thing with teeth like old fence posts and eyes that know too much, gives you a look. You try to read it. Is it contempt? Pity? Or is he just annoyed that you slept longer than he did? You hoist yourself up onto the saddle and immediately regret it. The leather's stiff, the padding is non-existent, and every muscle below your waist starts composing an angry letter. You shift to find a tolerable position and realize there isn't one. Somewhere behind you, a younger rider is laughing, probably because he hasn't developed saddle boils yet. You make a mental note to trip in later. Accidentally, of course. The horde is assembling. You see the standard bearers checking the battered flags, wolf heads, eagle talons, and other symbols half faded by sun and soot. Attila hasn't appeared yet, but you can feel the weight of his presence, like thunder that hasn't boomed yet, but has already curled its fingers around the earth. Men are checking gear, bows strung, spears bundled, shields strapped tight against their backs. There's the usual chaotic ballet of last-minute repairs. Someone tying their sandal with a bit of twine, another greasing his stirrup with leftover fat, and one poor soul trying to chase down a chicken that escaped from someone's breakfast bag. You pull your scarf higher over your nose. It doesn't help much. The scent of bodies, horses, and wood smoke clings to the wool like gossip in a small town. You squint toward the east. The plains stretch out endlessly, all bleached grass and distant tree lines, and you can't quite remember which river you crossed last. Was it the Tisa? The Maros? They blur together after a while. What you do remember is the mud, the thick, grasping kind that tried to pull your boots off every time you stepped in it. You suspect there will be more of it today. A rider gallops past, shouting something you don't catch, but it's loud enough to get everyone moving. Horses shuffle. Men bark orders, mostly invented on the spot. Someone slaps a donkey that doesn't belong to them. You steady your mount and feel the leather bite back against your thighs. The itch returns. You tell yourself not to scratch. It only makes it worse, but your hand drifts anyway, betraying you. It's a losing battle. Finally, the crowd parts slightly, and there he is. Attila, broad-shouldered, cloaked in furs darker than the sky behind him, eyes sunken like caves that don't want visitors. He says nothing. He doesn't have to. His horse paces once, twice, and then he lifts one arm. No speech, no fanfare, just the motion, and everyone begins to ride. You do too. Your legs protest. Your back whines. The itch becomes a background hum in your brain. But you ride. Because if you don't, you'll be left behind. And no one ever comes back for those who fall behind. The wind sharpens as the column stretches out across the frozen steppe, and your stomach starts complaining louder than your saddle sores. The cold air hits your insides with every breath, and all the bouncing on your exhausted horse has churned your guts into something that sounds suspiciously like rebellion. The sun is still barely more than a pale smudge behind a veil of clouds, but the order goes out to stop for breakfast. Not a luxurious pause, just long enough to cram down something chewy and vaguely warm before the next 30 miles of misery. You dismount stiffly, knees cracking like firewood, and lead your horse to a patch of brown grass where a few other riders have gathered around a smoky fire. One of them is already stirring something in a battered pot that looks like it's been through 6 campaigns and at least one nervous breakdown. The scent wafting from it is unmistakably meaty, but not in a reassuring way. You brace yourself for what comes next. Someone ladles a scoop into a horn bowl and hands it to you. The liquid sloshes. It's grayish, thin, with mysterious chunks floating near the surface, one of which might be hoof, but you decide not to investigate. You crouch near the fire, bowl in your gloved hands, steam hitting your nose in bitter little curls. The first mouthful burns your tongue slightly and tastes like regret, but it's hot and your body is too tired to argue with calories. Around you, men eat in silence. Some chew loudly. Others just hold their bowls near their faces, letting the heat warm their chapped cheeks. One guy, still wrapped in a fox pelt cloak that hasn't been cleaned in months, casually picks something out of his teeth with a dagger. You recognize him as the one who once tried to cook rat stew using a stolen Roman helmet. Nobody brings that up anymore. Then the murmurs begin. You hear it from 2 riders at your left. Whispers about a Roman fort not far from the river bend, supposedly undermanned, poorly supplied, and ripe for the taking. One says it's a soft target. The other shakes his head and says it's a trap. Another voice joins in. Didn't we already raid that one? Someone else grumbles. No, that was the one where Bors lost half his ear. Bors, seated behind you, shifts and glares, the top of his left ear now permanently shaped like a waxy crescent moon. A scout rides in fast, breathless and dust-streaked, and heads straight for one of Attila's lieutenants. They speak in low, hurried tones. The lieutenant glances up, scans the camp, and then disappears back into the knot of higher command. You don't need to hear the details. You've seen that look before. It's the same expression they wear right before telling you to pack up, ride faster, and try not to die in the first volley of arrows. Someone near the fire sighs, leans back on their elbows, and mutters, "Guess it's that fort after all." The mood shifts. Everyone goes quiet. Even the slurping stops. You stare at your bowl, now mostly just oil and bones. A bit of something rubbery clings to the edge. You decide that's enough breakfast. You hear a different kind of sound next, a metallic clink as someone straps on their chest plate. Then another begins checking arrow fletching. Someone hums tunelessly under their breath, a nervous habit picked up after that time their cousin took a javelin to the ribs mid-laugh. Every little action feels like part of a silent ritual, the pre-battle routine. No one calls it that, but everyone feels it. The anticipation, the tightening of the air, the bad news settling in like smoke. You glance toward the ridge, where Attila is already mounted, speaking to his inner circle. You can't hear him, but you can see the gestures, sharp, dismissive, urgent. One of his brothers tries to object, maybe to propose a slower route, a longer wait. Attila just stares at him for a few seconds too long. Then he rides off. That's the end of the discussion. The men around the fire shift again. Some pour out the last of their broth. A few start gathering their gear, not hurriedly, but with the resigned rhythm of people who've done this too many times to panic. You rise to your feet, legs stiff, joints aching from the cold. Your hands fumble with your saddle straps, still a bit slick with frost. Your horse watches you with a gaze that seems to ask, "Really? Again?" The wind picks up just as you finish lashing your pack. It whistles through your helmet ties and lifts bits of ash from the fire pit into the air like gray snowflakes. A few flakes land on your tunic. One of them clings for a moment, as if uncertain whether it should stay or let go. A younger rider approaches, wide-eyed and too clean, clearly new. He asks if you've ever seen this fort before. You tell him no. He asks if it's dangerous. You lie and say it probably isn't. He seems comforted. You don't tell him about the last fort, the one where the gates looked open right until they weren't, and half the front line disappeared under a rain of ballista bolts. He'll learn soon enough. Nearby, someone's horse is refusing to cooperate. It bucks as its rider tries to mount, drawing laughter from a few of the veterans. They laugh too hard, because they know the horse might be the smartest one here. Another rider leans close to you and says, "Heard they've got gold there. Statues. Wine." You nod, but you've heard that before, too. It's always gold, always statues, always wine. You've yet to see much of it survive the fires and the chaos. What you do remember are the ruined gates, the echoing streets, the desperate civilians, and the scent of everything burning at once. The wind changes direction. Somewhere out there, past the rolling hills and scattered trees, is the next target. Another dot on a map Attila keeps only in his mind. The Huns don't draw maps anyway. They remember things through motion, through muscle, through fire, and the taste of ash. Someone blows a horn, short and sharp, not the call to charge, but the one that says, "Mount up, we're moving." You swing into your saddle, the leather no more forgiving than before, and adjust your pack so it doesn't jab into your spine quite so eagerly. Around you, the horde rises like a tide, boots crunching, horses stamping, a few birds lifting into the sky as if they've learned to recognize what this sound means. As you ride forward, bowl forgotten on the ground behind you, you think again about the rumors. Maybe this time it's true. Maybe the fort has gold. Maybe there will be wine or a wound bed, or at least a roof that doesn't flap in the wind. But probably there'll just be fire. The first patch of mud hits just after midday. It doesn't look like much at first. Just a darker stretch of earth, glistening faintly under the pale winter sun. But your horse's hooves sink into it with a reluctant squelch, and then everything slows to a crawl. What was once a decent, if bone-jostling, pace across frozen grass becomes a choppy slog through an endless swamp of sticky, soul-draining sludge. It's not just the horses that suffer. The carts, overloaded with supplies and trophies from the last town, begin to groan and shudder like dying animals. Wheels spin, axles creak, and angry shouts echo across the plain. One cart goes sideways into a ditch. Its driver, an older man with more beard than face, curses in at least 3 languages, whips the mule twice, then immediately slips and lands flat on his back. You pretend not to laugh, but your horse's ears twitch in amusement. Around you, the horde begins to stretch out. Some riders veer off in search of firmer ground. Others dismount to push their wagons by hand, and a few just give up and sit on nearby rocks, chewing dried roots with the same enthusiasm as a bored goat. The mud has become the main character now. It demands attention. It clings to your boots, climbs up your horse's legs, and flicks into your mouth if you're careless with the reins. You can taste it, wet, bitter, ancient. Somewhere ahead, you hear the sound of someone losing a boot entirely. A howl of frustration follows. You look down at your own feet, grateful for the extra leather straps you tied this morning. That was a good decision, a rare one. To your right, 2 warriors are arguing over who has the right of way. Both are stuck, both are equally miserable, and both are armed. Eventually, they settle it in classic Hun fashion. A short bout of shoulder shoving, followed by both of them getting stuck worse than before. The real winner is the third rider who bypasses them entirely by galloping straight through a shallow stream and soaking his trousers up to the thighs. His expression suggests victory. His squelching steps later will suggest otherwise. You push forward, every step of your horse making an obscene sound. The mud pulls and grips like it's trying to make a deal. Give me your boot, and I'll let your horse pass. You decline. You are not in the mood for negotiations. The sky begins to darken prematurely. Clouds gather in lazy swirls, hinting at snow or worse. The cold is not sharp anymore. It's damp and weighty, sinking into your bones, the kind that makes your clothes feel heavier and your thoughts slower. A light drizzle begins, just enough to make everything slimmier. The mud responds with enthusiasm, swelling like bread dough left too long near a fire. You pass a group of foot soldiers who gave up pretending to march hours ago. They trudge knee-deep in slop, their legs encased in filth, their expressions the kind you usually see on statues of saints enduring martyrdom. One of them raises a hand in a half-hearted greeting. You nod. Solidarity in suffering. Somewhere behind, a child wails. Not an unusual sound in the horde, where families, servants, and camp followers trail the warriors like smoke after fire. You glance back to see a woman trying to calm the little one, her arms wrapped in soaked wool, her face streaked with rain, and whatever she fell into 10 minutes ago. You wonder how many of these people actually chose to follow Attila. Probably fewer than would admit it. Then there's the smell. It creeps in slowly, hidden by the scent of wet leather and horse sweat, but unmistakable once it arrives. Rot. Something dead. Maybe several somethings. You wrinkle your nose and scan the horizon. A pile of broken timbers comes into view. A ruined outpost or abandoned farmstead, now half swallowed by the swamp. Carrion birds circle above it, their cries sharp and joyless. You ride closer and see the remnants of what was once a structure. Wooden beams, a collapsed roof, and what might have been a stable. Now it's a soggy skeleton, ribs of timber poking up from the muck. A few bodies lie half buried in the mud, already stripped by scavengers. No signs of a fight. They were likely left behind when the fort fell. Or perhaps they simply couldn't keep up with whatever caravan passed through last. The mud is a ruthless editor. It erases the weak quickly. No one stops. Not out of cruelty, just fatigue. The horde has learned not to linger around the dead. They smell, They bring flies, and sometimes they make the horses nervous. You ride on. The path ahead looks worse. The mud deepens into ruts carved by the carts ahead. Some have been abandoned, wheels snapped, contents scavenged or spilled. One cart, appended and forgotten, has a pair of boots sticking out from underneath. Nobody's bothering to check. It's been that kind of day. A small hill offers temporary relief. You steer your horse uphill, grateful for solid ground, and pause at the crest to take in the view. It's not encouraging. The horde stretches behind you in a long, meandering smear of humanity, horses, wagons, smoke, and frustration. Ahead lies more bog, more ruin, the faint outline of distant trees that might mean shelter, or might mean another marsh. You catch your breath, then realize you're not alone. Beside you, a senior rider sits astride a black moray, expression unreadable beneath layers of grime and damp fur. He doesn't speak, just nods toward the horizon and says, "Still better than dying in a Roman jail." You nod, unsure whether you agree. Then you both ride on. A few more miles of trudging, and the ground begins to dry slightly. Enough to give the horses a break, enough to let the carts groan forward without protest. The drizzle fades, leaving behind a sheen of damp that will cling to everything until nightfall. You chew on a strip of jerky, so tough it could double as boot leather, and try not to think about how far the fort still is. The mud has done what it always does. It has equalized everyone. Nobles, warriors, servants, horses. All covered in the same thick, gray film. All reduced to the same shared shivering complaint. You ride on, not because you believe in the cause, not even because Attila commands it, but because there's no turning back. There never was. Not after you crossed that first river. Not after you burned that first village. This is the life now. Cold, wet, itchy, and slow. But at least the mud has let go for now. By the time the sun begins to dip low behind the skeletal tree line, a quiet change moves through the camp. The pace slows, not from fatigue alone, but from recognition of what lies just ahead. There's a village on the horizon, tucked into a grove of leafless trees, its rooftops huddled low as if trying to avoid notice. Smoke from cook fires curls above the homes in cautious ribbons, too sparse to suggest confidence, too steady to be abandoned. You've seen places like this before, Romanized settlements at the edge of nowhere, too proud to flee, too poor to offer real resistance. They always say they're neutral. They never are. The scouts who first spotted it have returned with familiar expressions. One looks annoyed, the other simply bored. They dismount in silence, lead their horses toward the central line of command, and within minutes, instructions begin to spread in that peculiar way Hun orders do, through nods, squints, and vague gestures that somehow everyone understands. The next step isn't shouted or posted. It's simply expected. You and 6 others are told to prepare, not for battle, for diplomacy. Of course, you've come to understand that among Attila's ranks, the word diplomacy has a different meaning. It doesn't involve parchments or fancy seals, nor does it require a translator who actually speaks fluent Latin. What it usually involves is the threat of fire, a few broken doors, and enough menace to push a decision without ever raising your voice. You nod at the officer giving the order, who doesn't even look up from the fire he's warming his hands by. The implication is clear. Ride to the village, make the demand, take what's given. If necessary, take a little more. The road there is short and muddied by the remains of an older trail, likely used by traders or tax collectors months ago. The fields around it are barren for the season, the stubbled remains of wheat stalks poking through patches of frost. Crows drift lazily from fence post to bare tree branch, watching your group pass with a wariness that borders on familiarity. They've followed this procession before. You reach the outskirts of the village as dusk settles in properly, that brief moment of fading light where the world turns quiet and strangely expectant. Torches are lit along the village path, placed too neatly to be casual. They knew you were coming. A few villagers step forward as your horses slow. None of them are armed. The one holds a rusted tool with the kind of grip that suggests he might consider it. The others have the posture of people who've negotiated before, heads tilted low, shoulders drawn, faces strained by both fear and defiance. One man, perhaps the elder or spokesman, lifts a trembling hand and offers a formal greeting in halting Gothic. Behind him, figures gather in doorways. Most of them look too young or too old to be useful in a fight. You can hear a child crying faintly behind one of the shuttered windows. You dismount without speaking and take a few slow steps forward. The ground here is firm enough, though the scent of damp earth and wood smoke clings to everything. The rider beside you holds up a satchel, as though it contains a scroll of peace terms. Instead, it's empty. The message is clear. Fill it, or else. You keep your voice measured and low, asking for tribute. Grain, coin, blankets, wine, whatever they can offer in exchange for not being reduced to a smear of ash on the map. It's not a question. It's a kindness that it's being asked at all. The elder nods stiffly and gestures behind him. A few villagers scatter to gather what they can. You wait, unspeaking, as a cart creaks forward, bearing the offering. A half-full sack of barley, a worn wool cloak, 2 jars of preserved fruit, and a small pouch of silver coins no heavier than a handful of dried berries. One woman places a set of hand-carved bowls into the cart last, her hands lingering on the rim of the largest before she steps back. You recognize the look. It's the quiet resignation of someone who knows they won't be getting it back. There's no point in haggling. You signal to your companions. One of them steps forward to examine the goods, while another lights a torch. Not to use, just to hold. The flame flickers higher as the wind shifts, casting long shadows that dance along the villagers' faces. The light reflects in their eyes, and you can feel the tension rise without a word being spoken. The torch doesn't move any closer, but it doesn't have to. The symbolism is enough. Everyone understands fire. The elder nods again, more quickly this time, and steps back. No one speaks of promises. No one begs. Even the woman with the bowls keeps her silence. Your group accepts the tribute, loads it onto a spare horse, and begins the slow retreat back to camp. As you turn, you glance once over your shoulder. The villagers are already moving, some closing doors, others pulling children back inside. A few watch you go without blinking, their eyes heavy not with hatred, but with something quieter. Something that has learned to survive, even if that means forgetting. The ride back is uneventful. The sky above has turned a dull violet, streaked with the last light of day, and a low mist creeps across the fields like a curtain, falling over a performance everyone already knew the ending to. You can hear the faint calls of night birds, the distant crackle of fires being stoked, and the soft clinking of the pouch of silver in your saddlebag. You wonder whether the village will still be standing next spring, or if it will vanish like so many others, folded back into the landscape, remembered only by the crow that sits nearby each morning, waiting. When you reach the edge of the camp, no one asks for a report. The goods are handed off without ceremony. The silver vanishes into someone's ledger. The wool cloak is passed around like a novelty. The preserved fruit disappears before it can even be inventoried. No praise, no reward. Just another successful mission, added to the invisible tally of spared villages and quietly stolen peace. You return to your place near the fire, brush the damp from your cloak, and eat a bowl of something hot and flavorless. The men around you talk about nothing in particular. A few boast quietly, others hum tunelessly to themselves. Someone tells a story about a goat that once charged a Roman officer and lived to brag about it. You let the voices wash over you, your thoughts drifting back to the village, the woman with the bowls, the old man with the shaking hands, and the torchlight that never quite reached the woodpile. There was no fire tonight, but everyone knows it's only a matter of time. The village fades behind you, and the camp returns to its restless rhythm. Carts creaking into new formations, fires crackling low, men muttering as they unstrap saddle gear with fingers stiff from cold and tension. You ease yourself off the horse and stretch carefully, joints protesting in quiet chorus. The night has settled in properly now, and with it comes that particular stillness the steppe seems to specialize in. A quiet not born of peace, but of expectation, like a long breath held just before something breaks. You find a spot near the outer ring of tents, close enough to the main fire to catch some warmth, far enough from the command circle to avoid being noticed. You're not in the mood to be useful. You lay your cloak out, adjust a half-burnt log, and settle in. Someone hands you a strip of meat and a crust of something that might have once been bread. You chew it slowly, not because it tastes good, but because there's little else to do while the world waits. The firelight throws flickering shadows across the makeshift camp, tall figures bending and swaying on tent walls, like ghosts still trying to march. You glance toward the center, where Attila sits near the largest fire, surrounded by his closest. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. Just being there shifts the mood. No one tells jokes too loudly when he's nearby. No one argues over sleeping space or wine portions. The closer you are to Attila, the more careful your words become. He's seated on a thick oak stump, wrapped in wolf pelts that look like they'd still bite you if given the chance. His face is unreadable, neither scowling nor relaxed, just locked in a kind of permanent stillness that keeps everyone guessing. You've seen him like this before, staring into the fire as if it owes him answers. Some say he hears voices when the flames crackle. Others think he's memorizing every insult Rome has ever made against him. You don't ask. You just avoid eye contact and sit with your shoulders low. One of his lieutenants leans in to speak. Attila listens, nods once, and then waves a hand. That's enough for the man to retreat, his eyes flicking downward like he's just escaped being stepped on. You watch as Attila picks up a bone from a small dish beside him, gnaws at it with absent effort, and then tosses it into the fire. It cracks sharply as it burns. No one speaks after that for a while. Nearby, a group of warriors quietly shares a skin of wine, passing it back and forth with little ceremony. There are no toasts, no songs. The kind of silence that settles around this camp when Attila is near isn't the kind that comes from respect or reverence. It's the stillness of people waiting out a storm they're not allowed to name. The men joke freely when he's gone, loudly, even foolishly. But when he's within earshot, their voices shrink. He has that effect. Even when he's calm, the air feels thick, like the sky before a lightning strike. Someone begins to hum near a smaller fire on the edge of camp. It's an old tune, the kind that floats up from deep memory and hangs like smoke. You recognize the melody. It's from the plains near the Danube, sung by people who live off barley and herded pigs. You once stayed in a village like that for 2 days before the horde moved on. They had clay ovens and roof tiles. You remember how soft the bread was. Your knees are sore again. The saddle rash has returned with quiet vengeance, and the chill in the air has crept under your cloak. You shift positions, trying to find a spot of comfort, but the earth here is packed hard and unforgiving. A nearby dog, lean and dust-colored, curls itself into a perfect circle beside a cart. You briefly consider trading places with it. You can't see stars tonight. The clouds have pulled a thick gray blanket across the sky, leaving only the orange flicker of firelight to mark your place in the world. In a few hours, the camp will begin to quiet completely. Those lucky enough to sleep easily will roll into blankets and vanish into dreams. Others, like you, will lie still, half awake, one ear tuned to the movements of horses, or the rare crack of someone stepping where they shouldn't. Attila has not gone to bed yet. He rarely does before the fires die down. Some say he he barely sleeps at all. One of the younger riders once asked if Attila feared being assassinated in his sleep. The older men laughed and said no one would dare try. And if they did, he'd probably wake up just before it happened. Not from the sound, just from knowing. Sleep doesn't come easily when the boss is this close. Not because of fear, exactly. It's more like trying to rest beside something enormous and silent, something that chooses not to look at you, but might at any moment. You wrap your cloak tighter and turn away from the central fire, eyes closed, though not yet sleeping. The night continues around you, slow and watchful. You hope tomorrow brings a quieter kind of exhaustion. The smoke from the fires lingers longer than it should. It doesn't rise, it hovers, curling low through the camp, like it's trying to wrap itself around your chest. Even with your cloak pulled tight and your hood drawn low, you can feel it settling in your throat, turning each breath slightly sour. The warmth of the flames is deceptive. One side of your body sweats under the layers, while the other aches from the creeping cold. No matter how you shift, comfort stays just out of reach. All around you, the camp resists sleep. Not loudly. No one dares raise their voice with Attila still seated by the central fire, but in small, restless ways. Someone sharpens a blade too close to his sleeping roll. A pot clinks as a late meal is stirred. Horses shuffle and snort in the darkness, agitated by the scent of ash or something else, something heavier in the air. You lie still, listening to all of it, eyes closed, but mind far from sleep. It isn't fear, exactly. You're too used to the edge now. It's just the tension that creeps in when you know the quiet won't last. The fires give off more smoke than light. The sky above is a thick wash of clouds. No stars, no moon, just a ceiling of gray pressing down. You pull the blanket over your shoulder and turn, only to meet the same lump in the earth that's dug into your side every night this week. You would move, but the idea of undoing all the warmth you've managed to trap feels worse than the discomfort. Somewhere near the center of camp, Attila hasn't moved. His shadow remains steady, outlined by the fire, the shape of someone not sleeping and not quite thinking in the way others do. You've seen him sit like this for hours, silent, barely blinking. No one dares interrupt him. Even the nearby lieutenants keep their voices low, their movements small. When he's this still, the entire camp follows his rhythm without meaning to. Everything slows, even the wind. You try closing your eyes again, focusing on the background murmur of camp life, the hiss of damp wood, the rustle of cloaks, the occasional snap of a twig beneath someone's heel. It's the sound of a place that wants to sleep, but won't risk it fully. Dreams here are shallow, interrupted. You drift briefly, then startle awake at the sound of a dog barking once, sharply, before being hushed. You adjust your position and try again. Eventually, your body gives in, not because you're comfortable, but because exhaustion doesn't ask permission. You don't fall asleep so much as you forget to stay awake. Time skips. Moments blur. You dream of the steppe unfolding endlessly ahead of you, of hooves pounding like war drums, of smoke trailing behind every road you ride. You wake once more to darkness and a shifting sky, unsure how much time has passed. And just before the first horn of morning, word arrives. A scout returns early, horse panting, cloak soaked with frost. The officers gather quickly, hunched and whispering. You catch the word Rhine. You hear cities. You hear ready. The mood changes fast. Fires are kicked apart, cloaks shaken out, horses fed without complaint. The lazy rhythms of camp life are replaced with quiet efficiency. Whatever peace the night pretended to offer is gone. There's a direction now. And as you climb stiffly to your feet, your legs heavy with half sleep and your hands already reaching for your gear, you understand. This wasn't just another march. You're heading for the Roman cities next. The land begins to change long before the city comes into view. It's not abrupt, but steady. like someone gradually turning the dial on your surroundings. The wildness of the plains, the chaotic sprawl of steppe and bramble, starts to thin out. The grasses grow more uniform. The trees, no longer just wind-bent, half-dead things, begin to appear in orderly lines, as if someone had asked them politely where to grow. You're still riding through open country, but the openness feels different now. Less indifferent. Watched, perhaps, measured. Your horse seems to notice too. It walks with more hesitation now, placing its hooves with the kind of care it usually saves for river crossings. You shift in the saddle and feel your thighs pinch in the same places they always do, but the ache is easier to ignore now. The road under you has firmed. The ground is packed tighter. The rocks in the trail feel less like scattered bones and more like deliberate steps. That's when you spot the edges of it. A road. A Roman one. It's strange how quickly something so mundane can feel unsettling. These stones were laid centuries ago by men who've long since turned to dust, but their intentions still echo beneath your horse's hooves. The road runs straight ahead, too straight for nature's hand, and disappears toward the horizon with the quiet arrogance only Rome ever managed to master. Even broken and weather-worn, even cracked and half swallowed by weeds, it still holds. The line still knows where it's going. You follow it because you have no choice. The wind shifts slightly as you descend into a shallow valley, and the air takes on a richer scent. Damp earth, olives, wet clay. Somewhere out there, you swear you catch a whiff of smoke. Not the sharp kind that clings to your cloak every night, but the soft, faint curl of someone roasting meat or baking bread. Your stomach gives an involuntary twist. It's been days since you tasted anything that didn't resemble boiled sadness. You glance around, but no one else seems to react. Either they didn't notice, or they're trying not to think about it. Signs of civilization begin to creep in. You pass a wall, maybe a property line, maybe part of a long-forgotten estate. Vines have crept along its surface, thick and winding, but the structure still stands. Then come the olive groves, rows upon rows of knotted trees, spaced just so, their gray-green leaves trembling in the wind. The ground beneath them is littered with fallen fruit, some of it split open and blackened, others still plump. Birds flutter away as your company passes, and somewhere, a dog barks once and goes quiet. There's a tension in the group now, not panic, just that quiet, bristling awareness that comes when something familiar feels out of place. No one speaks much. Horses are checked. Water skins passed around. One of the older riders rubs his hands along the shaft of his spear over and over again. Not to clean it, but just to do something. You start to feel that creeping itch at the back of your neck. Not the physical kind, but the one that says you're too exposed. Then, over the next ridge, the rooftops appear. At first, just a suggestion of color. Faded terracotta tiles glowing under the pale sun. Then chimneys, the edges of towers, the rounded curve of a distant dome. And then the walls. Pale and wide, they rise from the landscape not as a challenge, but as a quiet assumption. They're thick, rectangular, and lined with worn defensive stones that have repelled many things over the years. You stare at them longer than you mean to. You've seen cities before, but this one still believes in its own safety. Below the walls lies a city that hasn't yet imagined it could fall. Even from here, you can tell. The fields beyond the gate are still being worked. Laundry flaps lazily on lines strung between second-floor balconies. Smoke curls from chimneys not in fear, but in comfort. You see children, specks of movement in the distance, chasing one another through a courtyard. A cart rolls across a small bridge, its driver sitting straight, not even glancing toward the hills. They haven't heard, or they don't believe. The column halts on the ridge overlooking the city. Your horse breathes heavily under you, its sides rising and falling in slow rhythm. You dismount, more from instinct than command, and stretch your legs. The earth here is soft and dry, still untouched by the bootprints of an army. You kneel briefly, not to pray, but to check the tightness of your bootstrap. And when you stand, the view seems closer. The city feels like something you could reach out and touch. Attila arrives shortly after, riding up the center with a pace so smooth the ground seems to move for him. He doesn't dismount. He rarely does at first. He just stares, the way he always does, like he's waiting for something to flinch. His horse, black and alert, stands still beside him, ears twitching. Attila says nothing. He doesn't have to. One of his lieutenants leans close and murmurs something. Another gestures toward the far gate. There's a small outpost there, manned by perhaps a dozen soldiers. You can barely make them out, but they move slowly, casually. One is leaning on his spear. Another is seated, back to the gate. You watch for a long time, waiting for them to notice what's coming. They don't. You eat a handful of dried grain from a pouch at your side. It tastes like dust. You chase it with a sip of lukewarm water, stale from a leather skin. It's the same water you've been drinking for days, but now, with this view in front of you, it feels worse. You try to imagine what their water tastes like. Cold, pulled from stone wells, probably served in cups. The men begin to shift into their standard formations, not aggressively, just out of habit. Archers move forward. Shield bearers check their gear. A scout is dispatched to ride around the walls, checking for weaknesses, side entrances, overlooked paths. You've done this so many times it almost feels rehearsed. Still, this city feels different. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the silence. Or maybe it's the realization that the people inside have no idea what's coming. They haven't packed. They haven't hidden their valuables. They haven't fled to the countryside. They've baked their bread and set it to cool. They've watered their gardens. They've sent their children to nap. A voice calls out to your left, a low order to ready the horses again. You mount. The column begins to move, not fast, not yet. Just enough to close the distance. A messenger gallops past, dust flying up behind him. His face is pale, and his words are clipped. You catch only two, gate and ready. Attila raises his hand. The entire ridge falls still, not a sound. You look down at the city again, at the rooftops and markets and temples. The wind carries the faint smell of something sweet. Honey, maybe, or crushed figs. The sun warms your shoulders. And as you begin your descent, you can't help but think, this is the last day this city will ever be itself. The formalities begin the same way they always do. A pause, a flag, a rider sent out with a message no one truly expects to be honored. It's all part of the rhythm now, this uneasy ballet of threats. And courtesies that makes the final destruction feel just a little more civilized. Attila plays the game well. He allows the offer of negotiation, not because he believes in peace, but because it amuses him to watch cities pretend they have a choice. You're selected as part of the envoy, not because of any diplomatic skill, but because you still look passable in a clean tunic and can sit on a horse without drooling. You've done this before. You know how it goes. You ride down to the gates with a few others, carrying nothing but words and just enough menace to make those words land. You're not here to open discussion. You're here to offer survival with conditions. The kind that taste like ash, but are better than the alternative. The gates don't open immediately. That's the first sign of trouble. The second is the group of soldiers who appear on the wall, far more armed and far less polite than you'd hoped. You can see their crests, their shields, the glint of helmets that were polished this morning. One of them, a centurion by the look of him, calls down in Latin, his tone sharp and theatrical. He's performing for the crowd behind him as much as for you. He announces the city's refusal to surrender, their loyalty to the empire, and the strength of their walls. all things that sound much better when shouted from above. You wait until he's finished. Then your companion, the one with the deep voice and the permanent scowl, delivers the official response. The same one that's been delivered to a dozen cities before this. The terms are simple. Open the gates, give tribute, spare your people. Refuse, and suffer the consequences. He says it plainly, without flourish, as if reading from a script written in blood. The Roman captain sneers. You're not surprised. They always do it first. There's a long pause afterward. Not the kind that means consideration, but the kind that means someone's about to make a bad decision. You hear it before you see it. The low thunk of a bowstring, the hiss of something cutting the air. A single arrow lands in the dirt just a few paces ahead of you, deliberately short. A warning shot, they think. A message. You don't flinch. You've seen too many arrows to flinch now. You just look up at the captain and give him a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. Then you turn your horse and ride back. Behind you, the gate remains closed. The moment you return to the command post, the atmosphere changes. There's no outrage, no speeches. Just a quiet efficiency as orders begin to shift. Archers are repositioned. Siege engineers start unpacking whatever improvised devices they've cobbled together from broken carts and tree trunks. Fire pots are checked, wrapped, stacked. The siege isn't announced. It just starts to happen, like rain rolling in over the hills. You return to your post near the front lines, where the other mid-ranked riders have gathered. One of them, younger than you, scratches nervously at his cheek and mutters something about the stupidity of pride. You nod, but you're only half listening. Your eyes are on the walls. Figures move along the ramparts, checking equipment, shifting crates, preparing oil. You know the routine. You've been on the receiving end of it more than once. And you also know how thin most of those defenses really are. Rome has walls, yes, but walls don't reload quickly. They don't replace fallen men. They just stand there until they don't. Attila rides past behind you, surrounded by his usual quiet storm of advisors. He doesn't look toward the city. He doesn't need to. The pattern has already played out 100 times before. The real decision was made long ago. The first volley is a warning. Hunnic archers move forward and loose a wide arc of arrows. Not to hit, not yet, but to make a point. The sky darkens briefly with motion, and the sharp hiss gives way to the satisfying distant sound of arrows hitting wood, banners, and stone. The defenders duck. Some return fire, but it's uncoordinated, rushed. They weren't ready. The next volley is more focused. Arrows tipped in pitch. A few bundles are set alight, sailing in long, flickering arcs before crashing onto rooftops and balconies. Smoke rises fast. Not ablaze, not yet, but enough to turn heads inside the city, enough to panic the animals. You hear the first bell ring. Too late. From your position on the slope, you watch as chaos begins to bloom behind the walls. It always starts small, shouting, a few running figures, the sound of something heavy being dragged. Then the rhythm breaks entirely. Someone fires a ballista bolt wildly. It misses everything. The weapon snaps sideways on its mount. Useless now. Your commander gives the signal. Axemen begin to advance with shields raised, while others set up ladders against the outer wall. They know it's early, but early is part of the design. Push hard before the defenders find their footing. You follow behind, drawing your blade not because you plan to use it yet, but because it's expected. A formality. The shouting grows louder. Arrows now come in both directions. Some miss wildly. One strikes the ground near your horse's hooves, and your mount jerks slightly, but you hold it steady. You press forward. The smoke is thicker now. You can hear something crackling. The scent of burning plaster and split wood hangs in the air. From above, a Roman soldier tries to pour boiling oil. It slips from his grip, and spills back down the wall. Screams follow. You look away, not from pity, but because you've learned not to waste energy on flinching. Negotiation, it turns out, is mostly about knowing when to stop pretending. And this city just missed its chance. Once the gates fall, it all begins to unravel. Not with ceremony or command, but with the kind of momentum that can't be reversed once it starts. The sound is what hits you first. It's not the clash of swords or the trumpet of victory, but a surge, like floodwaters spilling over a shattered dam. Iron boots slam against stone, men shouting in a dozen different dialects, horses pushing through alleys they weren't meant to ride, and somewhere, always, glass breaking. Always, you push through the remains of the main gate, now twisted open like the jaws of something dead. The hinges are scorched black. The arch above is fractured, with dust still raining down in slow, steady puffs. Someone ahead of you kicks a broken shield aside. Another shouts for the archers to stand down. There's no more need for precision now. What lies ahead isn't a battle. It's a harvest. The main avenue stretches before you, lined with columns and statues that once flanked ceremonial processions and military parades. Today, they flank chaos. You ride forward slowly, past a marble fountain already smeared with blood and ash. A golden-faced bust lies sideways in the basin, water trickling down its cracked nose. You recognize the likeness. It's an emperor, though you can't recall which one. They tend to blur together when toppled like that. The pillaging happens in layers. At first, it's strategic. Men targeting granaries, smithies, storehouses. Soldiers break down doors with measured force, looking for coin, for tools, for things that can be hauled away and traded. But it doesn't stay that way for long. Once the order breaks, the appetite changes. Men smash open merchant stalls not because they need what's inside, but because it feels good to make the shutters splinter. Someone finds a cellar full of wine and begins tossing the jars out into the street, cheering when they explode. Another rides straight into a bakery and emerges with both hands full of steaming loaves, laughing through a mouthful of crust. You dismount at the foot of a plaza and weave your way through the crowds. It's easy to lose track of time in this, each moment tumbling into the next, each alley revealing another door kicked in, another storeroom torn apart. You step over a tapestry, still rolled tight, trampled and half soaked in gutter water. Someone's prized possession, now no one's. In the heart of the plaza stands a temple, its columns cracked from the top down. The doors have already been forced. You duck under the lintel and step inside. The scent hits you first, incense still clinging to the air, fighting with the stench of oil and sweat. Gold fittings glint in the firelight. Candlesticks, platters, some religious idol you don't recognize, all gathered into piles by the door, ready to be carted off. At the far end of the chamber, a statue lies in fragments. A goddess, maybe. The head's been removed, the arms snapped off. You wonder if anyone even bothered to ask who she was before toppling her. Probably not. You crouch near one of the chunks, running your hand across the polished stone. It's still warm. The roof must have caught fire. Outside, the sky has begun to dim. The smoke thickens as more fires take hold. It started with torches, but now it's spreading on its own. Papered walls, broken beams, oil spills ignited by accident or design. You step back into the street and feel the temperature shift. Not just warmer, but hungry. The kind of heat that moves with purpose. You see a man arguing with his comrade over a velvet curtain. One wants to keep it, the other wants to burn it. They tug at either end like children. Finally, one shrugs and drops his side. The other stumbles back, victorious, only to have it catch fire seconds later when a stray ember drifts down from a second-story window. The flames leap fast. He throws it down and backs away, swearing. You walk toward the governor's villa, perched on a rise overlooking the city square. The gates have already been broken. The courtyard is filled with discarded armor, snapped lances, shattered pottery. The stairs are slippery with something you don't want to identify. Inside, soldiers are rummaging through chests, tossing silk robes and golden brooch into sacks. Someone is dragging a carpet down the hall. It snags on a broken lantern and tears straight through the middle. The governor himself is nowhere to be seen. Either he fled or he didn't. Either way, no one's asking. You pause near a window, looking out over the city. From this height, the fires seem almost orderly. Pools of orange blooming between rooftops. Smoke rises in ribbons, spreading eastward with the wind. You see figures running, some toward the gates, some toward nothing. A dog chases a horse through a market street strewn with fruit and broken pottery. At the far end of the road, a shrine is burning quietly, the flame eating its way up a mural of Saint Sebastian. Someone behind you calls out. They've found a stash of silver in a hidden chamber behind the main hall. You hear the sharp cheer that follows. It's always silver, always just enough to justify whatever happens next. You leave the villa and return to the street. The air is hotter now. The fires are no longer distant. They lick at the edges of rooftops, dance up the sides of columns. Embers drift past you like lazy insects. The wooden beams of the marketplace groan, then crack, then collapse in a flurry of sparks. You pass a statue lying on its side, its face split clean down the middle. A soldier is using the base as a table to sort his loot. You glance down and recognize the emblem carved into the stone. A she-wolf suckling twins. You remember that one. Rome's oldest myth. It lies now in pieces, its meaning reduced to rubble beneath someone's boots. No one gives orders anymore. The chaos moves on its own. A current with no source, no destination. You find your horse tied where you left it, agitated but uninjured. You mount, turn once to take in the city behind you. It was beautiful once. You can see that now, in the curve of its rooftops, in the width of its streets, in the layers of painted plaster beneath the soot. Even in ruin, it tells a story. Not one of conquest, but of fragility. Of things built to last, but never prepared to fall. And yet, tonight, it falls anyway. By the time the fires begin to shrink into slow-burning heaps, the real work begins. Looting a city may look chaotic from the outside, but once the heat fades and the shouts die down, the process becomes strangely organized. You know the rhythm by now. Everyone does. It's like watching ants break apart a carcass. At first, it's a frenzy. Then it's a method. And then, slowly, it turns into a marketplace. You ride back toward the city square, where carts are already being lined up. There's a system, sort of. Piles are sorted by size, by weight, by usefulness. Metal objects in one heap, cloth in another, foodstuffs in sacks, and things that shine. Coins, jewelry, fragments of gilded armor, kept closest to the center, where the higher-ranking officers watch with narrow eyes. No one steals openly under their gaze, not if they want to keep their hands. You dismount and walk between the wagons, weaving through piles of goods still warm from the rooms they were torn from. Someone has stacked a collection of marble busts near the steps of the forum, each one missing a nose or an ear. They're lined up like condemned men, their stony expressions unreadable even in defeat. A soldier squats nearby, using one as a stool while he ties up a bag of silver spoons. Another bust is being used to prop up a pot of boiling water. You consider saying something, but don't. To your left, a group of Huns are bartering over a pile of silk robes and a small harp. None of them quite sure what the harp is supposed to do. One man plucks a string, winces, and decides it's cursed. The others laugh and toss it aside. Behind them, a wagon creaks as someone tries to fit a gilded chair into a space that clearly wasn't meant for furniture. The legs stick out like the bones of a dying animal. Further down, the screaming begins again. Short, sharp, not battle cries this time, but the high-pitched, exhausted kind. You know the type. It comes from the houses that were missed in the first sweep. A family hiding in the cellar. A merchant locked in his own wine vault. Someone who thought the city's fall would come more slowly. You try not to listen. You try to walk faster. You pass a soldier, dragging a Roman officer by the ankles. The man is still alive, barely, his armor cracked open like a shell. His eyes follow you for a moment before he's pulled out of sight. You don't stop. You've seen too much of this already to pretend it feels like anything but routine. Back near the temple, someone has turned the outer steps into a sorting station. Piles of items line each tier, jewelry glinting under soot-streaked cloth, bronze weights from the scale, carved boxes too small to be empty. One man holds up a painted icon and squints at it. It depicts a saint with wide, sorrowful eyes. He turns it sideways, then shrugs and drops it into a sack. The face disappears beneath a clatter of coins. You crouch near a pile of books stacked on a fallen column. Most are damp, their spines split from the heat. You pick one up carefully. The leather cover has cracked from age, and the lettering is in Latin, neat and curling. You can't read much, but you recognize the name of a philosopher, someone Ramon, someone who once thought the world could be explained in sentences. You flip through the pages, pause at a half-charred illustration, then set it down gently beside the others. You doubt anyone else will care, but you do. Behind you, a wagon overturns with a crash. A chest bursts open, spilling cups, pins, and a scatter of gold coins that vanish into the dust like spilled grain. There's a brief scramble, 5 men diving forward, grabbing, shouting, accusing. A lieutenant shouts something sharp, and just like that, it stops. They scatter, muttering, and the chest is sealed again, this time under watch. You step into a house that still smells like wax and roses. The front room is untouched, surprisingly quiet, with an oil lamp still burning on a corner shelf. On the wall hangs a portrait, a woman and a young boy, both painted with delicate lines and golden halos. You wonder if they're real or imagined. If the artist painted his own wife and son, or some ideal of what Roman serenity was supposed to look like. You glance once more, then move on. Upstairs, a window has been shattered, the curtains pulled down and fashioned into makeshift sacks. You pass a soldier wrapping silver cutlery in someone's embroidered bedsheet. He nods at you, then holds up a comb carved from ivory. Worth something? He asks. You shrug. Maybe, maybe not. It's all worth something to someone, just not here, not now. Outside, the light is changing. The fires have died down, leaving columns of smoke that drift upward like lazy ghosts. The city is quieter, but not calm. Nothing about this is calm. The noise now is lower, more measured. Oxen groaning under the weight of carts, voices calling out numbers, officers dictating who gets what. It has the strange cadence of a marketplace without buyers, only takers. At the far end of the square, a man tries to smuggle a silver mirror under his cloak. He makes it halfway across the plaza before someone sees the glint. He's dragged back, the mirror taken, and left with a split lip and a lesson he probably won't forget. For the rest of the day, he doesn't speak. You find a quiet spot near the edge of the forum, leaning against the cool stone of a half-destroyed colonnade. Your hands are dirty, your eyes stinging from ash, your legs aching in that familiar, dull way. Around you, the city continues to empty itself, of valuables, of people, of meaning. What once stood as a monument to Roman order now resembles a warehouse mid-evacuation. Someone walks past you, arms full of wooden cups. Another hums a song you've heard 100 times, something tuneless but persistent. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, not yet, just to rest inside your own head, to quiet the catalog of items and losses, to forget for a while the sound of something being pried from someone else's hands. The spoils are almost sorted now, the screaming less frequent. But beneath it all, you can still hear the city breathing. Ragged, shallow, uneven. It hasn't died yet, but it's close. The city doesn't end in a single moment. It fades, slowly, like the embers that cling to burnt beams, glowing long after the fire itself has moved on. You leave on foot at first, leading your horse by the reins, its hooves crunching softly on stone, now littered with soot and shattered pottery. The wind has picked up, just enough to stir the ash, sending it spiraling in slow drifts through the air like gray snow. It settles in your hair, catches on your eyelashes. You try not to breathe too deeply. The air smells like everything you've just destroyed. Behind you, the last of the carts creak into motion, piled high with stolen goods wrapped in stolen cloth. Nothing about them looks right. A bronze statue of some forgotten god leans sideways against a sack of grain. 2 loaves of half-burned bread sit beside a cage of terrified chickens, none of which belong to the man pulling the reins. The cart lurches forward anyway, trailing smoke and fragments of splintered wood. Your boots scuff over the mosaic floor of the forum, now almost unrecognizable. What was once an image of a lion hunting a stag is now a mess of broken tiles and charred dust. You remember walking across it when you first entered, noting the craftsmanship, the symmetry. You hardly glance at it now. It's strange how quickly something beautiful can lose its meaning once it's stepped on enough times. The streets are quieter today, not from peace, but from absence. Many of the townspeople have fled or hidden, or simply disappeared. A few remain. Women with haunted eyes dragging buckets of water from cracked wells. Boys with dirt-streaked faces staring at the backs of soldiers, saying nothing, giving nothing away. You meet their eyes briefly, and then look away. It's easier not to wonder which home was theirs. You mount your horse once you reach the edge of the market, easing yourself into the saddle with the slow stiffness of someone who's been in the field too long. The animal shifts under you, eager to move. It doesn't like the smell here. Neither do you. You ride past what remains of the central shrine. The roof has collapsed in on itself, crushing half the altar. A tangle of smoke and morning light cuts across the rubble, making it look briefly holy again, before a gust of wind blows the ash sideways and the illusion is gone. A small group of prisoners is being herded toward the back of the column. You recognize none of them. They carry nothing. Some cry silently. Others just walk, heads down, feet dragging in the dirt. You wonder where they'll be taken, if they'll be ransomed, traded, or absorbed into some nameless labor camp along the border. You've seen all 3. You've heard what happens when the 4th option is chosen, the one no one writes down. You ride on. Past the eastern gate, you enter the narrow path that cuts between the old aqueduct and the hillside farms. The aqueduct still stands, its arches blackened but intact, casting long shadows that stretch across the road like ribs. You imagine the engineers who built it, careful men with plans and plumb lines, certain their work would outlast them. It has, technically, but only barely. You pass a field of trampled wheat, now more mud than grain. Someone has tried to gather the remains into a bundle, but gave up halfway, the stalks left tied in a crooked knot near a scorched olive tree. The tree still smolders at the base. It must have caught when the storehouse next to it burned. The upper branches are untouched, swaying gently in the breeze, like they're pretending not to notice. Further along, the road is lined with milestones, carved markers worn down by weather and time. The inscriptions are faded, but you can make out a few names. Emperors mostly. Aurelian, Constantine, men who ruled over millions. Their names now serve as landmarks for carts full of stolen flour and second-hand armor. You slow your pace near the outskirts. There, you spot something unexpected, a home still intact. Not lavish, not even large, but standing. A small villa with painted shutters, its garden torn up, but the roof's still whole. There's no one outside. Curtains twitch at the windows. Someone is watching. You don't stop. You don't call out. You just nod once toward the doorway and keep riding. They've survived this long. Maybe they'll survive what comes next. A soldier behind you is singing softly, a low, tuneless hum that barely carries on the wind. You don't recognize the melody. It's probably not a real song, just something to fill the silence. The others begin to join in, not with words, but with the rhythm of marching feet, the scrape of carts, the snort of tired animals, the sound of departure, the sound of a city being left behind. You glance back only once. Smoke still curls from the rooftops. The temple dome has collapsed entirely now. A few columns lean inward like mourners. The marble road shines dully beneath the ash. The gates, once proud and painted red, are now stained with soot, the iron hinges bent, the threshold blackened. The wind blows harder now, tugging at the banners that once declared the city's allegiance. One falls as you watch, fluttering to the ground in slow, quiet folds. You turn forward again. The path ahead stretches long and pale under the morning sun. The sound of the city grows fainter behind you, fading into a mixture of memory and echo. But you know it will follow. These places never leave you completely. They cling in the dust on your boots, in the soot worked into your clothes, in the strange silence that creeps into your dreams at night. You ride on anyway. The road out of the city stretches long and straight, cutting through a landscape that feels just as emptied as the buildings you've left behind. The horses walk slowly now, not from exhaustion, though there's plenty of that, but because the weight of silence presses down on everything. Not the loud silence of fire or collapse, but the quieter kind, the kind that follows ruin like a shadow. You can feel it in your joints, in the way your hands tighten on the reins without meaning to. Behind you, the city is no longer burning brightly. It smolders now, quietly, resigned, as if even the flames are tired. The column winds its way out across the open plain in subdued formation. There are no songs, no cheers, no raised voices. Just the shuffle of hooves on packed earth and the steady creak of carts overloaded with plunder. Wheels groan beneath their burdens, statues wrapped in stolen linens, silver platters wedged between sacks of barley, oil jars stuffed with torn silks and scattered coins. You ride behind one such cart for a while, watching as its load shifts slightly with every jolt in the road, a gilded candelabrum poking through the folds of someone's blanket like the bones of a forgotten saint. You pass a broken column lying in the grass near the road's edge, the remains of a milestone, perhaps. Its inscription has been worn away almost completely by time and weather, leaving only a few shallow grooves where the name of a long-dead emperor once stood. The base is cracked, one corner buried in the dirt, the other scorched black. A raven perches on it briefly as you pass, then takes to the air in silence, circling once before vanishing into the pale sky. You don't look back. Farther down the line, a rider's saddle creaks in rhythm with his horse's gait. He adjusts his posture often, shifting under the weight of a rolled carpet strapped to his back. It flaps slightly in the breeze, shedding bits of ash with every sway. Another man carries a set of bronze tools slung across his shoulders, the handles clinking with each step of his mount. You hear him muttering under his breath, not prayer, not cursing, just words spoken out of habit, as if keeping his mouth busy might keep his mind from wandering back through the streets he just left. You try not to think about the faces, but they come back anyway. The child hiding under the cart, hands covering his ears, face streaked with soot. The merchant who tried to offer a family ring in exchange for safety, only to realize no one was listening. The old woman seated at the threshold of a stone house, hands folded in her lap, staring ahead as if watching a play only she could see. You passed her on the way out, her silhouette small against the ruin of her home. She didn't move. She didn't ask for anything. She simply existed there, quietly, while the world she had built burned around her. The sky above is the dull white of overcast distance, that colorless stretch of light that offers no real sun, just enough to hurt your eyes. You squint into the wind and pull your hood higher. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls once. Not from the city, it's too far now, but from some outpost or monastery, ringing out of habit. It sounds too clear in the stillness, too clean. It reminds you, briefly, that other people still live beyond this road. People who haven't yet seen what you've seen. People who are still pretending the world is whole. You pass a stretch of farmland, the fields choked with ash and trampled stalks. A low stone wall runs along the edge, crumbling in sections. A small shrine sits nearby, toppled and blackened. The figure inside, once a painted saint or protector, is shattered, its torso lying face down in the dust. A soldier dismounts and lifts it with a grunt, revealing a hollow space beneath where someone had hidden a pouch of coins. He pockets them without comment, mounts again, and continues on. The column halts briefly at a shallow stream to let the animals drink. You dismount and stretch your legs, pacing to loosen the tightness in your calves. The water is low and brown with silt, but it moves, which is enough. You cup your hands and splash some across your face, wiping away the grit that's been crusted there since morning. When you look up, you catch a glimpse of the city behind you, just the top of the walls and the tallest spire, gray against the horizon. Smoke still curls upward in soft columns. One final roof gives way as you watch, collapsing into itself like an exhausted sigh. No one says anything about it. There's nothing left to say. You ride on as the road turns northward, skirting the edge of the hills. The elevation grants you a clearer view of what was left behind. You can see the outer neighborhoods now, smaller homes clustered together like frightened animals. Some still stand, walls blackened, windows blown out. Others are gone entirely, reduced to charcoal outlines and scattered roof tiles. The ruins spread outward from the city like ripples in water, each one smaller than the last, until they vanish into the green. A small bird lands on the trail ahead, hopping twice before lifting into the air again. You follow its arc until it disappears behind a hill. There's something about its movement, so clean, so oblivious, that makes your throat tighten. You haven't seen anything untouched in days. In the late afternoon, the camp is made on a stretch of high ground overlooking a bend in the road. Fires are lit carefully, sparingly. No one wants attention. The mood is subdued. Like the closing act of a performance, everyone regrets attending. You eat something bland and hot from a pot passed between groups. You can't tell what's in it. Root vegetables. Old meat. Something scorched at the bottom. It fills your stomach and does nothing else. At evening, a few soldiers begin telling stories, old ones worn smooth from repetition. Not about battles. Not anymore. They talk about strange omens. A dream one of them had about a black river rising to swallow the camp. Another swears he saw a wolf standing upright near the city gates, unmoving, watching as the fires burned. No one laughs, no one scoffs. The stories settle around the camp like fog, thickening the air. You lie down with your back to the wind and stare at the darkening sky. The stars have started to appear, weak and slow, blinking one by one like they're unsure of the invitation. You listen to the breathing around you, the soft snoring, the wheeze of someone 2 fires away. You try to close your eyes, but it's still there, behind them. The city, not as it burned, but as it stood. The way it looked when you first saw it from the ridge, perfect and unreal. You wonder how many others felt that moment and buried it just as quickly. You wonder if, somewhere, someone stayed. Not out of duty, not to protect, but because they couldn't imagine living anywhere else. You turn over. The wind picks up, carrying with it a faint sound, so soft you almost don't hear it. Not voices, not bells. Drums, not close, not rhythmic, just one slow beat. And then another. The others haven't noticed it yet. But you sit up, slowly. Because in every tale you've ever heard of Attila, in every whisper passed through tents and campfires, when they think he's not listening, there's always a final march, a final place, a final night when the wind changes direction and the men grow quiet and the drums start without warning. No one knows where he's gone, not exactly, but somewhere ahead, just past the reach of your firelight, they're building something, something that doesn't want to be found. The rumors arrive before the sunrise, not in the way of official proclamations or shouted orders, but like smoke that finds its way into every corner of camp. You hear it whispered from two soldiers, warming their hands near the edge of a fire, muttered under breath as if saying it too clearly might make it true. At first, it doesn't register. You assume it's just another death. There are plenty, and most pass unremarked. But this whisper carries weight. It quiets voices mid-sentence. It turns heads. It halts a blade halfway through sharpening. Attila is dead. You sit up slowly, your blanket still clinging to your shoulders, the cold air sneaking down the back of your neck as you try to make sense of the words. You expect someone to laugh, to shout that it's a lie, or some strange joke, but no one does. The fire crackles. The wind rustles the canvas of nearby tents. In that space between disbelief and silence, something sinks in. Something heavy. You rise to your feet, brushing ash from your cloak, and look around. The camp is different this morning. Not louder, not panicked. Just still. As if the entire horde has collectively forgotten what to do with its hands. No horns are blown. No orders are barked. Men shuffle between fires, staring into them, as if waiting for direction to emerge from the coals. You pass a group huddled around a wagon, none of them speaking. One man holds a half-eaten piece of bread and hasn't moved in several minutes. You move toward the center of camp, not because anyone called for you, but because something draws you there, some magnetic pull where the heart of the horde has always been. Normally, Attila's command tent stands like a pillar in the wind, taut with movement, surrounded by watchful guards and riders delivering reports. Today, the guards remain, but their eyes are distant. Their hands rest on their weapons, but not as protection, more as anchors. The tent flap is closed. You stop a few paces away. No one says anything. No one moves to open it. Someone finally speaks. A man you vaguely recognize. A captain from one of the Eastern divisions. His voice is hoarse, and he doesn't speak to you directly, just into the air, as if explaining to himself. He died in the night, he says, after the wedding, in his sleep. There it is, the story beginning to take shape. You hear fragments from nearby. He had married again that evening, to a new bride brought from a distant tribe. There had been feasting, laughter, strong wine. Some say he drank more than usual. Others say he looked tired, his eyes sunken but bright, like the last hours of a fire. Then, during the night, he did not wake. His servants found him just before dawn, motionless, blood pooled around his head and soaked into the furs beneath him. A nosebleed, some say. A simple thing. Too much drink, a vessel burst, nothing more. Others glance at the bride and speak no further. A few nod solemnly, muttering about fate, about signs, about the price of living too long in the shadow of gods. You've never seen Attila still before. Even at rest, even in silence, he seemed to hum with some low, unreadable tension. He was always pacing, or thinking, or watching. When he rode past you, it felt like the world bent slightly to accommodate him. When he entered a tent, the walls seemed to shrink. Now he is just gone. No one has opened the tent. Not yet. There's an unspoken understanding that the sight of him still quiet, no longer directing the world with a glance, might break something in all of you. It's easier to remember him standing, towering, breathing like fire beneath his ribs. The bride has been taken away. Where, you don't know. No one says her name. The women in the camp move carefully now, glancing toward the command tent and speaking only when necessary. Someone has already begun preparing the funeral arrangements, though no one seems sure what those arrangements are supposed to be. This has never happened before. There is no precedent, no blueprint for burying the man whose name made cities tremble before the gates even opened. You walk the perimeter of the camp, past men sharpening weapons they won't use today, past horses that paw nervously at the earth. The animals sense it too. That shift, that absence where pressure used to live. A few riders argue softly over nothing at all, just to hear their voices in the air. By midday, a slow procession begins. Not toward the city, not toward conquest, but inward, toward the center of the camp, toward the tent that still hasn't been opened. Men gather in widening circles, not pressing close, but watching, waiting. Some believe the body should be burned, in keeping with the old ways. Others insist he must be buried with treasures, warriors, and horses, in silence and secrecy. And still others speak of rivers, of waters that swallow what they are told to protect. You find yourself among them, though you don't remember walking there. The flap opens briefly, just enough for a few chosen men to step inside. Their faces are unreadable. They stay for only a moment. When they return, they carry nothing, say nothing. But something in their eyes confirms it. It's not rumor now. It's truth. You hear the phrase spoken quietly, for the first time since dawn. Not shouted, not sung, just murmured like a confession passed between believers. The scourge of God is dead. The phrase lands heavy. It doesn't echo. It doesn't spread. It simply settles, like dust after a collapse. You sit on a rock near the edge of the crowd, watching as others file past the tent, one by one. Some bow, some do nothing. A few cry, but not openly. And as the sun begins to fall behind the hills, casting the camp in gold and shadow, a new kind of hush settles over the earth. Not from fear, not from grief, from something stranger, something hollow. You realize then that no one knows what comes next. Not the generals, not the priests, not the men who followed him since the first river was crossed. And not you. But you're going to find out, because soon they will bury him. And no one, not even the men who dig the grave, will ever be allowed to speak of where he lies. The decision is made without ceremony. Not in a war council, not by the elders or chiefs, but quietly, behind the canvas walls of the leadership tent, by men whose voices are rarely questioned. When the order comes, it's spoken softly and followed without hesitation. You hear the words passed from one officer to the next, like a spell not meant for open air. We build the river, they say. No one asks what it means. But everyone begins to move. You rise before the sky lightens, your breath misting in the cold as you help dismantle the edge of camp. Wagons are readied, tools loaded, ropes coiled with precise care. There's no confusion, no barked commands. Just a strange unity, a gravity pulling every task into motion. No one smiles. No one jokes. You've watched men prepare for raids, for hunts, for long march through enemy lands, but never like this. This feels like preparing for a funeral and an escape at the same time. The body has already been moved. It's said he lies beneath heavy cloth and thick furs in the center cart, guarded by 12 of his most trusted men. None of them speak as they ride. You don't see his face. You don't need to. It's enough to know that for the first time in your life, you are riding alongside Attila, not behind him. He will not lead again, but even in death, he determines the path. The procession takes a winding, deliberate course through the lowlands, avoiding towns, roads, even footpaths. You cross shallow rivers where mist hangs thick over the water, and the mud sucks greedily at every hoofprint. You ride through quiet pine forests, where the snow still clings in shaded hollows. and the silence presses against your ears. Each man around you seems to understand that words are unwelcome now. Only the wind speaks, whispering through the tall grasses and leafless branches, brushing past your cloak like a passing spirit. By midday, you reach a narrow valley where a river forks and turns inward on itself, looping around a rise in the land. It's an odd place, quiet and sunken, hidden from the world by gentle hills and thickets of winter-thin trees. The water runs fast but shallow, its surface broken by reeds and old stones, with a bend wide enough to conceal a dozen wagons if you place them well. This, you realize, is the place. Not because someone tells you, but because the men begin to dismount and start to dig. They move quickly. The soil here is damp but loose, dark with old silt, easy to shift by hand and shovel. You join them, not because you're asked, but because it feels wrong not to. Everyone who can lift a tool takes part. Warriors, cooks, scouts, stable hands. For hours, no one speaks above a whisper. The only sounds are the wet thud of spades, the grunt of effort, the soft slosh of the river as it's gradually coaxed away from its bed. Because that's the plan. You are not merely digging a grave. You are building a temporary river. Rocks are hauled, branches lashed together. Mud is packed into long, narrow ridges to form makeshift levees. The men work in teams, moving like a single body. A small channel is dug upstream, slowly diverting the current. It's not an elegant system. Nothing about it is Ramang, with their precise arches and stoneworks. But it is fast. It is practical. It is Hun. By dusk, the river obeys. The channel has been carved deep enough, just for a time, to draw the water away. The old bed dries with eerie speed, leaving behind a glistening channel of mud, stones, and soft earth. Here, the true work begins. They lower him into the earth under fading light. You are close enough to see the edge of the coffin, wooden, dark, reinforced with iron bands. There are no speeches, no priests, no morning songs. Just the soft, rhythmic grunts of men pulling ropes, guiding him into the hole with steady hands. Beside him, they place weapons, treasures, the armor of fallen Roman commanders, and trinkets stolen from across the known world. A golden chalice still smeared with wine. A blood-stained banner from a conquered city. A child's carved toy, untouched. You don't ask what that last item means. You don't need to. Then come the horses. 2 of them, tall and dark, their eyes wide but unresisting. You do not watch what happens next. You've seen enough. You turn your gaze upward, where the first stars are starting to prick through the twilight, their light faint, like hesitant witnesses. The earth is packed back in, layer by layer, until the grave is no longer visible. The men work with the urgency of ritual, their movements practiced but unspoken. They smooth the soil with the flats of their blades, then scatter branches and rocks across the site to break the pattern. Grass and leaves are spread over the top, carefully, as if the ground had never been disturbed. But that isn't enough. The river must be returned. You watch as the levees are broken one by one. The water rushes in with a quiet roar, sweeping back into its old path, rushing over the fresh mound, burying it beneath the cold, silted current. Within minutes, there is no trace. No stone, no marker, no ripple. The river flows as it always has, and you realize, with a sudden chill, that you could ride past this place tomorrow and never know a king lies beneath your horse's hooves. But even that is not the end. As night falls, the last command is issued. The builders, the diggers, the watchers, all are taken aside. One by one, none return. You hear it whispered in the shadows, that no one who touched the grave is permitted to live, that this was Attila's wish, that his resting place remain unknown, untouched, unspoken. You stand very still, not moving, not breathing too loudly. You are not one of the chosen. You are close, but not inside the circle. You did not hold the ropes. You did not lay the stones. You wait, you listen, and you are spared. When the firelight finally returns to camp, when the last shovels are buried in the cart and the last torch is doused, no one speaks of what was done, not even in whispers. The men walk slowly, as if carrying the weight of something invisible. Some do not sleep at all. They sit upright in their cloaks, staring into the trees, waiting for nothing in particular. You lie back on your cloak, the sounds of the river lapping just beyond your reach, and stare into the sky. The stars seem clearer here, as if drawn to the place where a legend was hidden beneath flowing water. You wonder how long it will last. How long before someone comes looking, before someone digs too deep, reads too much, guesses too well. But you know the truth. And you know this. No map will mark it. No monument will honor it. The man who left cities crumbling and empires scrambling is gone now, sealed beneath the earth and water, guarded by silence and fear. And in the dark, as the river flows smooth and cold above his grave, history begins to forget the spot. But you never will. By morning, the river looks unchanged. It moves along its path as if it had never been diverted, never pressed into service to hide a secret. The water reflects the gray sky with lazy ripples, and the sounds it makes, soft sloshing, trickles over stone, are the same as before. You sit by it in silence, chewing a piece of dry bread and watching a leaf drift past. You wonder if it passed over the grave. You wonder if it knows the camp is already being dismantled. Tents folded, horses packed, carts loaded, but not with food or weapons. With tribute, chests, satchels, and heavy sacks, groaning with metal and cloth, sorted and resorted into neat piles under makeshift awnings. The horde doesn't pause to mourn long, not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to. Attila is gone, but the world still spins, and the spoils of his last campaign need to be divided before that spin throws everyone into chaos. You're not part of the decision-making, of course. That happens behind veils and under watchful eyes, with gold weighed in secret and arguments conducted through clenched jaws. Still, you see the edges. You see a chest pried open with a dagger to reveal a heap of tangled jewelry. Half of it Ramon, some of it older still, Etruscan maybe, or something more mysterious dug up from forgotten tombs. One soldier claims a pair of rings for the road, stuffing them into his boot. No one stops him. Nearby, another group counts coins in 3 neat piles: gold, silver, and iron. The gold goes quickly. That's always spoken for. The silver takes longer, needing weighing, testing, occasionally biting. The iron. Well, iron's heavy, rusts easily, and is worth less than the sacks it's carried in. Still, no one dares discard it. Some of it might be melted down, reforged into arrowheads or spear tips. Some might be thrown into river crossings for luck. A few believe certain blades made from it still carry Roman curses. You find yourself drafted to help haul one of the larger hoards to a waiting wagon. The chest is too big for 2 men, too awkward for 3, so 4 of you take the corners, straining as you lift. It creaks with the weight of coins, and oddly, a pair of silver-framed sandals wrapped in silk. You don't ask where they came from. You just know they belong to someone rich and now belong to no one at all. As you lift, the bottom gives slightly, and a few coins spill into the dirt. You freeze, half expecting someone to shout. But instead, the man across from you drops to one knee and starts gathering them with remarkable calm, brushing the soil away and polishing the coins on his sleeve before sliding them into his pouch. "Finder's fee," he mutters. You say nothing. You do the same. Once the wagons are full, a long, low whistle signals the next stage. The caravan begins to line up, not toward battle this time, but toward division, toward figuring out who gets what. It's not as simple as rank or reputation. It never is. Tribes have their own customs, their own pecking orders, their own debts and grudges to settle. Brothers argue over a horse saddle, encrusted with rubies. A chieftain from the northern clans stakes a claim to a crate of ivory combs, insisting they were taken from a villa his men stormed. A translator from the east produces a scroll written in gold ink and claims it as a gift for his wife. You don't speak the language of the scroll. You doubt his wife does either. Over time, the arguments grow quieter, not because they are settled, but because fatigue sets in. No one has slept well since the burial. Everyone walks as if their bones are heavier than they were yesterday. Even the horses seem subdued, their ears turned backward, their breath misting in quiet huffs. A man walks past you, dragging a velvet curtain behind him, its embroidered lions trailing in the dust. He stops briefly to cut a length from it with a knife and ties it around his arm like a sash. You see a boy, too young to be a soldier, maybe 14, staring at a pile of tarnished bronze coins. He doesn't touch them, just looks at them, eyes wide, like he's trying to imagine what they once bought. A loaf of bread? A cloak? A human being? The boy reaches down slowly, picks up one coin, then pockets it and walks away. By afternoon, the ground is a mess of footprints and wagon ruts, the remains of sordid treasure scattered in odd places. Golden goblets turned upside down, half-crushed crowns with missing gems, bolts of Roman fabric repurposed as saddle cloths. The grandeur of conquest fades quickly when it's laid out in piles like laundry. You hear a man mutter that Attila should have taken it with him, buried the whole haul in the river. He would have, another replies, if we hadn't needed to eat next week. They both laugh, but it's hollow, the kind of laughter that fills a hole and leaves it just as empty. You stand at the edge of the sorting grounds and look at the horizon. Somewhere out there, the empire is still reeling. Somewhere, a city is sending a delegation, unsure whether to send bribes or prayers. Somewhere, a Roman general is learning the news and trying not to look relieved. But here, in this muddy field, the real business of power unfolds. Not in war, but in what's left after war. Not in banners and trumpets, but in coins rubbed clean of ash. In armor scavenged from corpses and a man's tooth pulled from a golden goblet and tossed aside as too cracked to keep. The work continues into evening. The piles grow smaller. The wagons grow heavier. The arguments slow to shrugs and handshakes. No one leaves with everything they wanted, but no one leaves with nothing either. You walk past a woman holding a mirror so finely made it must have belonged to someone noble. She isn't admiring herself. She's studying the cracks. You stop near one of the carts and wipe your hands on your cloak, feeling the grit of metal and dirt under your fingernails. All this treasure, and still you feel no richer, just more tired. As the sun dips low and paints the wagons in red light, someone begins to sing, not loudly, not cheerfully, just a simple melody in a language you don't understand, rising over the clinking of coins and the creak of loaded axles. You don't join in, but you listen, because you know, deep down, that the gold will be spent, the silver traded, the iron melted, and the dirt washed away by rain. But the silence of the grave you helped to guard, that will outlast them all. The final coins disappear before first light, tucked into bedrolls, hidden inside saddlebags, or slipped beneath cloaks with the careful discretion of men who've learned never to trust wealth left in plain sight. No one boasts. No one counts their silver aloud. The spoils of conquest, so loudly paraded days ago, now move through the camp like whispers, passing hand to hand in silence, vanishing into the folds of cloaks and the bellies of wagons. As the last cart creaks into motion and rolls out across the frost-hardened ground, the horde becomes something else, quieter, slower, but no less heavy with tension. The gold is gone, but its weight lingers. When you rise, you find yourself moving without being told. The camp breaks down in a rhythm too practiced to need instruction. Men fold their blankets, cinch their saddlebags, tie their boots, and load what remains of the provisions onto carts that look emptier than usual. There's no urgency in the motion, no shouted commands, just that quiet, persistent expectation that the horde must move, no matter what it has lost. Attila is dead. His body has been hidden from the world, his treasure scattered among those still breathing. But his absence presses on the group like the weather, unseen, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. The ride begins without signal. The line forms as it always does, but there is no trumpet, no raised banner, no thrill of the chase. The horses move in small, reluctant steps, their hooves stirring up dust from the brittle ground. The men ride hunched, their eyes fixed on the horizon or the tail of the horse in front of them. No songs break the morning air. No stories fill the gaps between hoofbeats. The horde moves in near silence, as though it has agreed, without ever saying so, that this is a funeral march now, not a campaign. The road carries you through a changing land. The plains narrow into winding tracks. The fields grow rockier. The vegetation thins. Trees appear in scattered knots, twisted, leafless things with roots like fingers clawing through the soil. Each mile you pass takes you farther from the last settlement, farther from the riches of conquest, and deeper into a landscape that seems to want nothing to do with you. Birds scatter at your approach. The sky, once clear, begins to press in with low clouds that drift in sheets, heavy and colorless. The wind shifts direction, carrying the scent of cold stone and damp earth. It smells like a cave that's been sealed too long. By midday, a split occurs. A detachment of riders breaks off quietly, moving toward the southern ridges with half a dozen carts. They don't explain themselves. No one asks. You watch them go, their silhouettes small against the empty land. And you know what this means. The horde is beginning to fracture. Without Attila, there is no longer one direction. No single voice that makes men turn their heads. The leaders will try to hold it together. They'll promise unity, vengeance, glory. But deep down, everyone knows the truth. You can't march forever behind a man who no longer rides at the front. The main group continues north, toward a narrow forest, where the land dips into a shallow basin and the trees grow thicker. As you cross into its shadows, the air grows colder, the light dimmer. The road disappears beneath fallen leaves and frost-stiff branches. Horses hesitate. Riders speak in hushed tones. Some say this place is cursed. Others say it's sacred. But none deny it feels strange. The deeper you ride, the less sound reaches your ears. The world narrows until it's just your breath, the creak of leather, the soft clatter of hooves on old roots. When the halt is called, it comes more from the trees than from any commander. The forest opens into a clearing that looks untouched by man. No signs of travelers, no crushed grass or worn trails. Only a wide circle of frost-ringed earth beneath a low gray sky. The horses stop willingly. The men dismount slowly. No fires are lit. You find a place near a fallen log, unroll your blanket, and sit down, your back stiff and your hands cold. Around you, others do the same. No one speaks. No one needs to. Then the digging begins. You don't see who starts it, but soon you hear the sound clearly. Shovel against earth, soft and rhythmic, each stroke deeper than the last. You don't ask what is being buried. A man, perhaps, who died on the road and could go no farther. Or something more abstract. A relic, a message. A piece of Attila's legacy, too dangerous or sacred to carry forward. You imagine a chest, filled not with treasure, but with knowledge. Maps, scrolls, tokens of authority. You wonder if the men who dig know what it is they're hiding, or if they were only told to keep digging until the hole felt deep enough to hold a secret. The sound continues through dusk. No one helps. No one watches too closely. This burial, whatever it is meant to be unseen. When the noise stops, It doesn't stop abruptly. It fades. The final shovel of earth lands with a soft thud, and the ground is smoothed over, leaves scattered on top, as though no one had ever touched the place. It looks ordinary, utterly forgettable. And that, you realize, is the point. Night falls without a fire. You lie beneath your cloak, the frost rising around you, listening to the woods shift and breathe. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorts in its sleep. A man coughs. Another mutters something in his own language, too soft to make out. You keep your eyes open a while longer, watching the branches above sway gently in the breeze. Eventually, even the wind gives up. The forest goes still, and in that stillness, something settles over you. Not fear, not grief, just the understanding that this too is part of the march, not the conquering, not the celebration, but the silence after. It is in this darkness that legends lose their shape and become something else, something smaller, something quieter. You feel it now, that slow unraveling. The voices that used to echo across the plains are now just breath in the cold. The man who rode at the front is gone. His grave is sealed beneath a river. His followers, once united, now scatter like seeds in the wind. And you? You march forward, not knowing where the road ends or who will be left walking beside you. The stars do not come out that night. The clouds hang low, blanketing the sky as if trying to smother the last light from reaching the ground. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. To the trees, to the river, far behind, to the shovel still echoing in your thoughts. You wonder what else will be buried before the march finally ends. And when you drift, it is not into dreams, but into silence. By morning, the clearing is empty. The burial site, if it can even be called that, leaves no mark, no mound, no stone, no freshly turned soil. Just a patch of undisturbed earth beneath trees that have seen too much and spoken of none of it. The horde moves again, but more slowly than before. There's hesitation in the air, as if each rider is waiting for someone else to lead the way. What remains of Attila's inner circle rides near the front, but they speak in short phrases, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their expressions worn like old leather. The men who knew everything, the ones who followed him from his earliest raids, who sat beside him at fires, who carried the names of cities in their memories like charms, are no longer with you. You can feel their absence, though no one says it aloud. A few died in battle. A few in the sickness that passed through camp during the last weeks. More vanished quietly after the burial, splitting off under the excuse of scouting routes or settling old scores. Whether they were silenced or simply chose not to remain makes little difference now. Their voices are gone, and with them, the clearest pieces of the truth. The column stretches longer each day. It's not just the geography that spreads it out, it's indecision. Riders fall behind. Wagons stop more often. The cook fires grow smaller, more private, clustered by tribe or language rather than loyalty. You overhear arguments in tongues you don't speak. You recognize the tones, though. Disagreement, suspicion. Men weighing the cost of staying with the group versus riding out to test their luck on their own. Some are already packing extra water skins. Others whisper about offers from Roman envoys, safe passage, land, silver, if they pledge not to raid again. You ride near a man named Turan, a former bodyguard of Attila, who once claimed to have seen the king sleep with one eye open and a dagger clutched in his fist. Now, Turan rides in silence, his armor dulled by ash and his hands never far from the reins. He doesn't tell stories anymore. When you ask what happens next, he shrugs. I'm not the one who knew, he says. And the ones who did, they aren't talking. You pass a burned-out village just past midday. It isn't on any route you remember. No one claims responsibility for it, though the blackened beams and half-buried corpses suggest the horde had been there not long ago. Perhaps a splinter group. Perhaps someone settling a score under cover of confusion. The air still carries a faint odor of smoke, but no one stops. No one digs for valuables. Even the looters feel uneasy now, as if the old order has collapsed too fully for even chaos to find a footing. That night, a man disappears from the outer edge of camp. He isn't famous, just a scout, known for his sharp eyes and quiet nature. His horse returns the next morning without him, reins dragging in the dirt. A few men go out to search, but they return before noon, saying nothing. Whether they found him or not, they refuse to share. The horde accepts it, as it has accepted so many disappearances lately, and moves on. You sit by a stream at dusk, watching the water crawl past like a dying fire. Across the way, you see a group of men gathered around a map, their fingers tracing borders, pointing at cities that still stand. You know those cities. You raided some of them. Others paid to be spared. Now they're being spoken of like potential havens, as if the horde might transform into settlers, as if what once was a storm could become a wandering fog. The conversations have changed. Where once the talk was of glory, now it's of survival. Men who used to brag about their kills now speak of winter supplies and Roman hospitality. There's talk of splintering the horde into smaller bands, easier to feed, easier to lead. Some suggest returning east, where the grass is soft and the neighbors less armed. Others argue for pushing into Roman territory, again before the empire regains its footing. No consensus forms. No leader rises. And so, the silence stretches. You remember one night, weeks ago, sitting near the outer circle of firelight, while an old advisor, now missing, told the story of Attila's youth. How he was trained not just to fight, but to wait. How patience, not rage, made him feared. The advisor claimed that Attila could stare across a battlefield for hours without blinking, watching his enemy breathe, and that he once refused to attack a city simply because the smoke from its chimneys blew in the wrong direction. That man is gone now. No one tells that story anymore. And without it, the memory grows soft, like an edge dulled by time. It becomes legend again, not fact, not strategy. Just another tale that will fade when the last man who heard it dies. You ride past a stretch of river that looks familiar, though you can't say why. Perhaps you passed it weeks ago. Perhaps it's the one, the river. You scan its banks, looking for any sign, but find none. The water flows unbothered, its surface calm and cold. You realize then how easily memory slips from the world. Even yours. You were there, at the burial. You saw the grave sealed. And still, the land gives you nothing to hold on to. No marker, no hint. Just dirt and trees and water that forgets on purpose. That night, another voice goes quiet. An old man who rode with the king from the steppes. He does not die violently. He simply lays down by the fire and does not rise. His body is wrapped in a thin blanket and burned before dawn. No prayers, no chants. Just fire and ash, and then the crackling of branches returning to quiet. With each departure, the map shrinks. The circle of those who remember grows smaller, more brittle. Soon there will be none who can say where Attila truly rests, or what words were spoken at his grave, or how many horses died to guard his silence. The memory will fray until it becomes unthreaded entirely, stitched instead into myths and songs and warnings whispered by firesides in lands far from here. But tonight, you still remember. And for now, that's enough. The morning begins with a hush, the kind that doesn't come from exhaustion or reverence, but from something deeper, a kind of collective forgetting that begins to take root in silence. The camp stirs early, as usual, but the movements are slower now. Packs are tied with fewer words exchanged. Saddles are checked without instruction. Men glance at one another across the dwindling fire pits, but offer no greeting. The sense of purpose that once drove the horde forward like a fire in its chest has dimmed to embers, and what remains is not grief, not even caution, but the unsettling realization that no one quite knows where they are going anymore. They know the direction, yes, the path beneath the hooves, but not the purpose. That had died, quietly and completely, beneath the surface of a nameless river. You ride in the middle ranks, the forest having thinned behind you, giving way to rolling hills and broken scrub. You can no longer smell the scent of pine and wet bark that haunted the burial site. That place is behind you now, perhaps only a day's ride, yet already it feels impossibly distant. The landscape has shifted, gently, almost imperceptibly, and the world ahead feels like a different country altogether. The air is drier, the soil lighter. The wind, rather than whispering through trees, now skates across the open ground in long, unbroken sighs. The river, the one where Attila was buried, now exists only in memory, and already that memory is starting to blur. Not for lack of effort, you remember it clearly. The muddy water diverted, the grave dug with desperate precision, the strange, surreal moment when one of the king's teeth, dislodged in death, gleamed from beneath the shroud. But memory is not steel, it is wax. It bends, it warps. You try to replay the route back to that place in your mind, tracing the bends of the river, the formation of the trees, the pattern of the moss on the stones, but no matter how many times you try, you can't form a clear path. You could be placed a mile from the site and miss it entirely. The others have stopped talking about it altogether, not just out of loyalty or tradition, but because they know that speaking of the tomb is useless. Some of the younger men, the ones who joined late, who never saw the king at the height of his fury, ask questions when they think no one important is listening. They whisper stories back and forth, versions picked up from rumor and campfire lies. That he was buried in 3 coffins, gold, silver, and iron. That his horse was slaughtered and buried beside him. That a Roman priest was forced to bless the grave. That the men who filled it were immediately executed to ensure secrecy. That the river itself was cursed, and that anyone who crossed it now would never again know victory. You've heard them all. You've heard more. And still, you say nothing. Because the truth, whatever it was, no longer matters. The truth was buried along with the body, and the hands that lowered him into the ground will not speak of it again. Some because they are dead, others because they are tired, and a few, perhaps, because they understand that the power of the legend lies in its mystery. If the world never finds his grave, then Attila never truly dies. He becomes a shadow that lingers on every border, in every nervous Roman whisper, in every crumbling city wall. The grave was not just a burial, it was the final campaign, and it was won with silence. As the march continues, the land changes again. Small groves of olive trees begin to appear, overgrown and neglected. Their limbs hang low, heavy with dry, unharvested fruit that no one dares eat. The road, long since reduced to a trail, begins to show signs of ancient construction beneath the dirt. Cracked Roman paving stones, worn nearly smooth by centuries of feet, hooves, and wheels. You recognize them, not from education, but from pattern. Roman roads were always neat, always overly proud of their symmetry. And here, where the stones begin to show through again, you know you're nearing the edge of something different. In the distance, villas rise from the hilltops. Not castles or fortresses, but the long, flat structures of Roman wealth, once brilliant with painted stucco and glass windows, now faded and skeletal, their roofs caved in, their archways cracked. Some remain partially intact, still proud enough to hold off the wind. Others are barely more than rubble, their columns leaning like exhausted men. The horde slows as it approaches them. No one gives the order, but every rider feels it in their spine. This is no place to gallop. This is where whispers walk. The first villa you pass stands alone on a rise, ringed by cypress trees that sway like sentries. A dry fountain sits at the front, its basin filled with dead leaves and animal bones. The gates, once gilded, hang open on rusted hinges. You see no life inside, but you can feel the echo of it, the stories left behind in the stone. The meals once served in its inner courtyard, the quiet laughter of noble families, the scent of crushed herbs carried in on sandals. It's all gone now, but not erased, just waiting for someone to remember. A few men break off to explore, their curiosity outweighing their caution. You follow, not out of interest, but because the silence of the march is becoming too loud. Inside, the villa is cool and dry. Dust floats through the air like ash. The walls still hold fragments of frescoes, figures dancing, animals leaping, gods holding out their arms in gestures of invitation or warning. One of the rooms contains a collapsed ceiling and a shattered statue of a woman. Her head lies in the corner, eyes turned upward as if trying to watch something that left long ago. You find a side chamber with a floor mosaic still intact. It shows a river, winding through hills much like the ones outside, with golden fish leaping from the water and small human figures watching from the banks. One of the fish has been chipped away, its golden tesserae missing. You kneel and touch the edge of the broken space. It reminds you of something, though you can't place what. Maybe the chipped rim of a burial urn. Maybe the cracked tooth of a fallen king. When you leave the villa, the sun is lower and the wind has picked up. Dust skims the road, coating your boots. You hear someone mutter that perhaps the Romans buried their wealth in places like this, hidden behind the walls, beneath the floors. A few riders fan out again, poking through abandoned cellars and broken doors. But nothing of value remains. The empire has already looted itself in its collapse. That evening, the camp is pitched in the ruins of a nearby estate, not for defense, but for shelter. A courtyard with 4 standing walls offers a rare reprieve from the cold, and men gather around small, smoky fires fed by broken furniture and bits of dried vine. You sit beside a low wall, eating a handful of hard bread and listening to the crackling wood. One of the elders speaks about how, long ago, Roman governors sat in places like this, deciding the fates of cities over honeyed wine and bowls of olives. Now the bowls are cracked, the wine long gone, and the decisions have been replaced by guessing how long the salted meat will last. Someone laughs quietly at the thought that Attila might be watching. From where, no one knows. A god seat? A forgotten plain? Or nowhere at all. But you understand what they mean. His presence hasn't fully left, even if his body lies hidden beneath the river's slow breath. His image lingers, not in banners or statues, but in the choices the men make now, in the fact that no one dares name a new leader, in the way they still leave a space near the fire, unspoken, unclaimed. And so the night passes in gentle murmurs, in the flicker of flame against crumbling marble, in the heavy quiet of men remembering too much to speak. The tomb has been lost, the river reclaimed, the witnesses dispersed. There is no monument, no song, no coin bearing his face. And yet, here you sit, feeling him near. By dawn, the horde begins to stir again, this time with new purpose. The villas stretch farther into the hills, and word spreads that some still hold wine, supplies, even Roman tools. The men begin to speak of staying, perhaps not forever, but for a season. The idea of conquest has drained from their eyes, replaced by the simple desire for rest, for walls that don't move, for fires that burn where they're lit. As the sun rises over the broken ruins, you look across the old Roman land and realize the story has shifted again. Not ended, not yet, but turned. You are no longer walking in the shadow of a king. You are walking among ghosts, ruins, and the long, quiet echo of a legend that history is already beginning to reshape. And as you pass through a courtyard covered in weeds and soft morning light, you cross into a different kind of life altogether. The light creeps in slowly over the cracked tiles of the courtyard, slipping past fallen columns and weaving its way through the vines that have taken over what used to be a proud villa garden. You wake not to the sound of horns or hoofbeats, but to the thin, incessant whine of mosquitoes, hovering like tiny sentries just above your face. You wave them away, slowly, unwilling to commit to full consciousness, and stare up at a ceiling that's half sky. What's left of the roof frames the sunrise in uneven planks and stone ribs, and for a moment, you pretend you're back in one of the tents, before the rivers, before the burial, before the strange stillness that now follows the horde like a second shadow. You sit up on your blanket, brushing dust and a few persistent ants from your cloak. Around you, the other men stir in slow motion, blinking in the filtered light, stretching beneath blankets of rough wool and broken dreams. There's no urgency, no shouts of formation. The villa, despite its ruin, holds the horde in a kind of trance. It's not shelter in the traditional sense, but it's more than anyone has had in weeks. Stone walls, partial ceilings, a courtyard that catches the wind. And that illusion of safety is enough to make men linger. The air is thick, humid in a way that clings to your skin before you've even stood. Somewhere nearby, a half-buried cistern leaks into a shallow pool where frogs have taken up residence, singing their morning songs with lazy confidence. Mosquitoes rise in clouds from the water, undeterred by armor or curses. You slap at your neck, already itching. A companion chuckles from a broken archway, muttering that the Romans built everything except screens. Breakfast is a quiet affair, not because the men are somber, but because there isn't much to say anymore. The bread is stale, the meat thinly sliced, and too dry to chew without a long drink from the water skins. Someone has scavenged figs from a wild tree, and they're passed around with cautious appreciation. Sweetness is a rare thing, and it earns a few nods. A man with a half-broken flute plays a few wandering notes beneath a collapsed colonnade. It sounds strange in the open air, delicate, unsure, like the memory of a song rather than a tune itself. But no one stops him. Even the horses, picketed among crumbled statuary, seem to listen. You wander after eating, drawn through half-open doorways and vine-covered halls. The villa is sprawling, a single-level ruin that speaks of past wealth. The floor mosaics are mostly intact, though faded and chipped. One room holds a sunken bath, dry now but still elegant, its walls painted in soft blue waves. You crouch beside it, running a hand along the smooth stone, imagining the splash of water, the scent of oils, the laughter of men who once believed Rome would last forever. They're long gone now, those bathers. But their world clings to these details, the careful joinery, the balance of space and light, the absurd decision to inlay marble in a ceiling no one would see from above. Outside, two warriors argue over whether to take down a stone statue of a woman holding a scroll. One wants to smash it for the bronze bolts inside. The other says it would be bad luck to strike a scholar in stone. In the end, they leave her standing. She gazes toward the horizon, as she has for centuries, watching the past unravel. By midday, the sun begins to bite. The shade in the ruined atriums offers some relief, but the mosquitoes grow bolder, and the dampness of the air sinks into your bones. A group of men tries to rig a canopy from torn cloaks between two surviving pillars. The wind picks up just enough to mock their efforts. You return to the garden, where weeds have swallowed the walkways and fig trees split the brickwork with slow, quiet vengeance. A turtle, of all things, sits in the basin of a broken bird bath, blinking slowly. You nod at it because it feels appropriate. There's something deeply odd about resting in a place that was built for leisure. You've spent months moving from one ruin to the next, but this is different. This villa wasn't destroyed by fire or siege. It simply stopped, as if the owners packed up one day and never came back. Their touches remain, Mural fragments, the indentation where a statue used to stand, the neat layout of dining spaces, guest rooms, a private shrine with its offerings long since gone. You imagine a Roman family here, long before your time. Children playing by the fountain. Wine poured on balconies. Heated arguments over taxes or harvests or fashion, none of which would matter by the time you arrived. But now there's no laughter, no wine. Just men who were once soldiers, now turned scavengers, picking through marble for nails and arguing over whose turn it is to patch the water skins. Somewhere in the shade, an older warrior sharpens his blade out of habit, though he hasn't drawn it in days. Not since the last of the Roman patrols melted into the hills, their small forts abandoned without so much as a fight. The Empire still casts a long shadow here, but it's hollow now. And inside that hollowness, you find yourself wondering, what happens to a storm once it has nothing left to destroy? In the late afternoon, Attila is mentioned once, offhandedly, in jest. A man trips on a bit of marble, curses, then says, Attila would have turned this into a bathhouse again by now. The others laugh, not because it's disrespectful, but because it's true. He would have made it useful. He would have kept them moving. He wouldn't have allowed this softness, this lingering. But Attila is gone. His tomb is lost. And the horde, though it still bears his name in mutters and memories, has begun to drift. You see it now, clearly. These men, still fierce and proud, are no longer a blade. They are a handful of fragments from a shattered weapon. Useful, perhaps. Dangerous, even. But no longer one. As evening approaches, a few torches are lit in the deeper corners of the villa, more out of habit than necessity. The mosquitoes retreat, and the cooler air settles over the camp like a damp blanket. The music returns, this time a bit more structured. The same broken flute now joined by someone tapping on a hollow shield. It's not a song you recognize. But then again, you don't expect to recognize much anymore. And so you lie back against a fallen pillar, the stone still warm from the day, and let the crickets take over where the flute fades. The stars blink through the shattered roof above. You count them without meaning to, wondering if any of them shine above the river you once buried a king in. Wondering if anyone will ever find it again. Wondering if, even now, the water has washed away the last of the footprints. But for tonight, the marble is still beneath your back, the mosquitoes still buzzing near your ears, and the Empire still crumbling one vine at a time. The villa's old bathhouse sits at the far end of the estate grounds, half sunken into the hill and flanked by ivy-choked walls. The roof is mostly intact, arched in that proud Roman way with brick and care. Its great domed ceiling once echoed with conversation, splashing, the laughter of senators and silk-robed matrons. Now it echoes with dripping water, quiet mutters, and the occasional grunt of someone trying to move a broken bench. The fire-warmed pools are long cold, the hippocausts beneath clogged with roots and thyme, but the stone basins still hold rainwater. That, it turns out, is enough. By mid-morning, a rotation begins, men wandering into the bathhouse with towels over their shoulders and curiosity on their faces. No one dares call it luxury, but after weeks of riding in smoke, even the stagnant pools feel like a gift. You find your way in after a man you barely know waves you forward. Inside, the steam rises from heated stones, someone dragged in and doused with water from the cistern. It smells faintly of ash and thyme. Someone must have found dried herbs in a crumbling pantry. You lower yourself into the lukewarm pool, letting your sore muscles sigh into the shallow water. Around the edge of the bath, conversation starts to return. Not the barking of commanders or the sharp orders of battle, but something slower, more human. Men talk about their feet, about horses, about who snores the loudest. Someone jokes that Attila never would have allowed this softness. The laughter that follows is easy, unforced. You lean back against the smooth stone and close your eyes. listening to a story about a man who claimed to have seen a Roman ghost wandering the halls last night. His audience doesn't believe him, but they let him finish anyway. The gossip spreads like steam, soft, warm, not entirely reliable. Someone says a scout found a locked wine cellar 3 villas over. Another claims there's a Roman girl still living in one of the estates, silent and barefoot, watching the horde from behind curtains. A third, perhaps emboldened by the near comfort of clean skin, declares that the empire has already collapsed, and what remains is just the echo. No one agrees, but no one argues either. Later, in the shaded courtyard near what remains of the villa's kitchen, the scent of something unfamiliar draws a crowd. Bread. Not the hard travel wafers of the steppes, not the scorched flatbreads baked on stones beside campfires, but real, soft bread, pillowy inside, golden outside. Someone found sacks of flour sealed in clay, and against all odds, still dry. Another found a working oven behind the rubble, and spent half the morning scraping ash and testing fire. And now, for the first time in weeks, months maybe, there's food that doesn't fight back. You take a piece and tear it open, the steam rising like a memory. The taste is simple, rich in its plainness. No herbs, no oil, just warmth and the faint sweetness of time. A man beside you closes his eyes while chewing, as if this alone justifies the campaign. Others nod, passing out more slices. Some eat in silence. A few dip the bread in wine, someone watered down from the remaining jugs. A man tears his piece in two, hands half to a boy who's been trailing him for days. No one tells anyone to share. They just do. As the day stretches into afternoon, the villa begins to feel less like a ruin and more like a resting place. Not home, not permanent, but something between. A pause. You walk through the old colonnades and overhear new rumors. Some say a Roman lord might return to reclaim this land. Others say the emperor is dead or fled or replaced by a priest. Someone insists the Pope himself offered gold for news of Attila's grave. That last one earns laughs. No one dares tell them they walked right over it 3 days ago. There's a boy with a scroll now, copying something in charcoal against the wall. He doesn't write well, more sketches than letters, but he insists he's chronicling this moment. You ask why. He shrugs. Because if no one writes it down, someone else will make it up later. You nod, because that's the most sense anyone's made all day. He offers you a piece of charcoal, but you decline. What would you even write? That the fiercest horde in history now basks in lukewarm water and eats sponge-soft bread while watching lizards sun themselves on Roman statues? In the evening, the courtyard fills again. Not for orders, not for planning, but just because it's cooler there, and the breeze carries fewer flies. Someone sings a half-remembered song. A few men hum along. The lyrics don't matter. The tune is old enough to smooth the edges of memory. You lean back against a crumbled pillar, bread in your hand, a fire crackling a few paces away. The man beside you picks a splinter from his palm and mutters that maybe Rome wasn't so bad, if this is what they ate. The jokes continue, some gentle, some sharp. One man impersonates a Roman senator with a bowl for a helmet and a curtain for a toga. It's ridiculous. It's hilarious. It's the first time you've laughed this freely since before the rivers, before the burial, before the long stretch of silence that followed Attila's fall. You don't say his name out loud, but you know, it hangs in the back of every mind here, fading not because of disrespect, but because life keeps moving forward, no matter who's buried beneath the dirt. The night grows cool. Stars prick the sky again. The horde sleeps in corners of the villa, some in old beds pulled from storage, others on cloaks laid neatly over mosaic floors. You find your place along the edge of the garden, close enough to hear the frogs again, far enough to forget the smell of smoke that once clung to every corner of your gear. And as you drift towards sleep, full of bread, washed of grime, you wonder quietly what happens next. Not for the world, just for you. The bread will run out. The bathwater will go stale. The empire may push back. Or not. But for now, for just this night, you are a man resting among ruins, belly full, clothes dry, listening to the low chorus of laughter and gossip echo off marble that once hosted senators. And that, somehow, feels like a kind of victory. By the third day, the garden looks almost presentable. Not in the way the Romans once kept it. Trimmed hedges, sculpted pathways, marble benches polished smooth, but in a new, wild sort of order. The weeds have been cleared in patches, fallen branches piled into neat mounds. Someone even swept the dirt from a small tiled patio beneath the pergola, revealing a sun-faded mosaic of nymphs dancing among grapevines. It's half cracked and crawling with ants, but it's a space. And right now, that's enough. This morning, the men don't gather out of duty, but out of ritual. They've started calling it a meeting, though no one's really meeting about anything. A few lean against broken statues. Others sit cross-legged on the stones, bread in hand, or fig juice staining their sleeves. There's talk, as always, quiet, meandering talk about dreams, about sightings of wild boars in the hills, about a man who swears he heard music coming from an empty villa at night. You sit beneath a laurel tree, with its drooping limbs brushing your shoulders, watching the group drift toward comfort like water finding level ground. But beneath the slow rhythm of this strange garden life, there's a new current now. It runs through glances held just a moment too long, through the subtle weight of pauses in conversation, through the way a few lieutenants no longer look at each other directly when discussing who's responsible for what. It's not fear, at least not yet, but something colder, calculation. No one has claimed leadership, and no one wants to. Not openly. But with Attila gone, a silence has settled where authority used to live. And silence, as always, invites questions. Questions that hang unspoken between bites of bread and long drinks of wine stolen from forgotten cellars. Questions that flicker behind the narrowed eyes of warriors who once followed orders without hesitation, but now seem to pause before saddling their horses. Today, two lieutenants make a point of laughing too loudly near the fountain, throwing arms around each other like old friends. You've seen them fight side by side, but they've never been that close. Not before. Another man, known for his quiet competence, chooses a seat near the center of the garden and begins polishing his weapons in full view, slow and methodical. It's not maintenance, it's theater. The sort of behavior meant to remind others that hands may be washed clean, but they're still calloused from battle. You chew your bread and say nothing. A group of younger riders starts collecting broken roof tiles and stacking them into low walls along the edge of the garden. They claim it's to clean the place up, but everyone knows it's practice. Defensive layout, quick shielding, the kind of thing that used to be done under orders. Now it's initiative, resourcefulness, a bid to be seen as useful when someone eventually decides the silence has gone on long enough. The old men sit apart from it all, near a collapsed pergola where vines grow up through shattered beams. They don't talk much anymore, and when they do, it's usually in riddles. One of them says, without being asked, "No man who digs the ground wants to lead. Only the ones who build towers." You don't ask what it means. He's looking past you and he says it anyway. And then there are the watchers. A small number like you, who simply observe, who track the shifting of loyalties like weather, who know better than to speak too soon, but too clearly to pretend this will last. You watch how certain men now choose where to sit, closer to one fire, farther from another. You notice how weapons are laid beside beds, rather than hung up for the night. How a few once loyal scouts now avoid eye contact when asked about the surrounding hills. It isn't open conflict. Not yet. Just 1,000 nervous glances tucked between moments of laughter. 1,000 quiet calculations made with every step across the garden paths. At noon, someone tries to lighten the mood. A flute again, this time paired with clapping. A dance, half serious, half mockery of Roman elegance. The men cheer, toss scraps of bread, raise their goblets. For a moment, it works. The villa is filled with something like joy. You almost forget that this garden once belonged to men who ruled provinces, who had servants rake these paths and prepare their wine, who sat beneath these same vines deciding who lived and who paid taxes. You almost forget. But when the music fades and the shadows lengthen, the garden feels different again. Someone's counting supplies now, loudly, for all to hear. Not because there's a shortage, but because a man standing in the middle of a courtyard counting bread and oil becomes someone others listen to. Another begins sharpening weapons aloud, making a show of instructing the younger men. A third, one of the quieter warriors with a habit of staring too long at maps, is suddenly organizing shifts for watch duty. No one asked him to, but no one stops him either. You return to your seat under the laurel, your bread half eaten, the wine at your side growing warm. The bees are louder now, buzzing around the sweet figs. A man walks past you carrying 2 buckets of water, one for the horses, one for the bathhouse. He's whistling. And still, no one names a leader, because naming one means choosing sides. And choosing sides means admitting this peace won't last. As the sun begins to dip behind the hills, painting the garden in long gold shadows, a cool breeze passes through the archways. It carries the smell of mint from the cracked herb beds, dust from the broken roads, and just beneath that, the scent of something older. Like memory, like smoke that never really left the stone. You close your eyes and rest your head against the tree. But even now, you can feel the nervous eyes watching across the garden, waiting for someone to blink. The 4th morning at the villa breaks with the clang of a spoon on bronze, not a war drum, not a command. Just one of the older warriors calling for attention beside a cracked fountain, while holding a dented serving bowl like a ceremonial gong. It's not exactly the stuff of empire, but it gets the job done. The men gather slowly, some half-dressed, others still chewing on the last crust of breakfast bread. There's no speech, no declaration, just a simple announcement. Someone found a road marker. It doesn't sound like much, but it stirs the camp like few things have in days. A milestone, Roman, chipped and leaning, half buried in brambles, but unmistakable. That means they're near a real road again, an artery of the old empire. And more importantly, it means access to towns, not just ruins, but living places. Maybe markets, maybe officials, maybe. Well, no one's really sure what's left in those towns, but the curiosity is enough to mobilize the men. By mid-morning, a small group is sent to scout it. You go along, mostly out of habit. The road is rough, the paving stones worn and warped from time, but it still cuts a clear path through the brush. That alone makes it worth following. It feels strange to be walking on something built by hands that believed in permanence. These roads weren't made for raiders or refugees. They were made for mail carriers, tax collectors, priests, people with plans, people who thought centuries ahead. The first village you reach is less a town and more a shrug of architecture. Stone buildings, roofs mostly intact, one church with a bell that hasn't rung in years. But there are people. A few, at least. Thin, wary, and quiet. They don't run when they see you, which is already an improvement over previous encounters in less peaceful times. They nod, some mutter greetings. A small girl offers a fig. You take it, unsure what gesture to return. No one wears armor here. No one carries weapons openly. It's like stepping into the hushed dream of an empire that hasn't realized it's died. You speak with a man who calls himself a clerk, though he doesn't look like much of one. His robes are faded, his sandals patched with twine. But he carries a ledger and seems to know who owes what to whom. He's surprised to hear the horde is camped nearby. Not afraid, but surprised. He offers wine, cheap and watered down. He asks if the Huns are staying long. You shrug, because you honestly don't know. He nods again and says nothing. Back at the villa, word spreads quickly. A clerk means records. Records mean someone's still keeping track. And if someone's keeping track, then someone somewhere still believes in taxes. That realization chills the men more than any Roman sword ever did. That evening, another small delegation arrives at the villa. Not scouts, but officials. Romang, or what's left of Romang. Not senators, not soldiers. These are the stragglers of the bureaucratic class. Thin men in long robes, escorted by hired guards with mismatched armor. They arrive with scrolls, ledgers, and most surprisingly, gifts. Olives, wine, salt. One of them even carries a rolled carpet, red and sun-faded, which he lays carefully at the foot of the villa's largest intact archway, as if trying to summon a sense of ceremony from the stones. They're here to negotiate. Or, as one of them puts it with a tight smile, to formalize understanding. No one laughs. The language is foreign to the horde. Not Latin, not Greek, but the tongue of deflection, of vague offers and veiled threats. They compliment the men on their discipline. They ask nothing directly, but hint at agreements and temporary stewardship. One speaks of shared interests along the frontier. Another uses the word stability 4 times in one sentence without ever saying what he actually wants. Someone offers them food. They refuse. Not rudely, but with that bureaucratic skill of implying your bread is too humble and your wine too wild. Still, they stay. One of them inspects the bathhouse, frowns at the moss. Another wanders into the garden and comments on the charming asymmetry of the rebuilding efforts. You don't punch him, but you think about it. Later that night, as fires crackle in the courtyard and the gifts are quietly divided among the men, the question begins to circulate. Why now? Why send officials? Why now? After weeks of silence, after Attila's death, after the horde has gone quiet, the conquests paused, the riders content to rest in ruins? The answer comes slowly, through whispers, through stories overheard from the guards, through slips of tongue from the wine-loosened lips of the robe-wearing diplomats. Rome is fraying, not in one place, but everywhere. Governors are going unpaid. Legions are short on boots. Roads are collapsing faster than they can be patched. The empire, for all its marble and maps, is cracking at the seams. And so the officials come not to demand surrender or tribute, but to offer deals. Bribes, really. Stay here. Don't move east. Don't raid south. Keep the border towns quiet. Don't rattle the cities just yet. In return, gifts, wine, food, recognition, even titles, if the horde wants them. You could be made protector of the border, or defender of the foothills, whatever that means. The titles are fake. Everyone knows it, but the food is real. The wine is real. The salt, rare and sharp on the tongue, is very real. And for now, that's enough. The roads, meanwhile, remain half-broken, overgrown, cracked from weather and time. But the officials insist they're still maintained. They point to a stone bridge that's barely standing. They show maps with trade routes marked in red ink, as if the lines alone will keep the merchants moving. You smile politely. You say nothing, because what you see, what you all see, is that these men are not envoys of strength. They are the shadows of an empire, trying to bribe its way out of death. And the horde, once feared across continents, now sits in its marble courtyard, eating bribes and watching the world unravel like a poorly tied sandal. Still, no one leaves. Because part of you, maybe a quiet part you don't mention even to yourself, doesn't want to return to the road. Not yet. Not to the saddle sores, the bitter meat, the constant ache of campaign life. Here, for all its broken plaster and nervous visitors, There is bread. There is water. There are shadows of something almost civilized. And tonight, as you watch the officials pack their scrolls and shuffle back down the road, you know they'll return. Not because they want to, but because you're still here. And your silence frightens them more than your arrows ever did. It begins just as the sun crests over the ridge, with the soft sound of hooves against stone, rapid, scraping, panicked. At first, no one reacts. Morning has become a gentle rhythm in the villa. Slow stretches, shared bread, a few laughs under vine-draped arches. But this is different. The pace of the hooves is wrong. Too fast, too loud, too desperate. Within minutes, every head in the courtyard turns toward the broken gate, where a single rider lurches into view, dust trailing him like smoke. His horse foams at the mouth. The man's tunic is torn, not by blade, but by brush and panic. He doesn't wait to be asked. Breathless and wide-eyed, he blurts out a flood of warnings that tumble over themselves, soldiers, or perhaps locals with torches. Banners spotted beyond the hills, not a full force, but moving fast, and worse yet, under some Roman crest. He swears it. Could be a scout column, could be a patrol, could be something else entirely. But what matters is that they're heading straight for the villa, and they aren't far. Everything that had settled over the camp these last few days, the calm, the bread, the gossip, shatters in an instant. The villa's slow, luxurious rhythm fractures like plaster beneath a stampede. Men who hadn't drawn a blade in days now scramble to find weapons they left leaning against sun-warmed walls. The old order, shaky as it was, evaporates without a sound. Orders are shouted, contradicted, and repeated by different voices with different tones. You find yourself gripping your belt tighter, not out of need, but because everyone else is doing something, and the stillness feels dangerous now. No one knows who's in charge. That problem, long buried beneath bread crusts and warm water, now rears up like a reanimated corpse. Several men step forward, but their words run dry before they even reach sentences. One calls for scouts. Another insists they fortify the archway. A third starts assigning patrol shifts, only to be ignored. The silence left behind by Attila hasn't filled itself. It's simply echoed louder now that the walls are shaking. The scouts who do ride out return hours later with nothing conclusive. Shadows in the trees, glints of movement on the road. One swears there were Roman boots. Another saw farm tools, and nothing more. But the uncertainty is worse than a declaration of war. The not knowing coils through the villa like smoke, invisible but choking. Arguments flare. Some want to flee, take what they can, and vanish into the hills. Others insist the villa can hold. It's got walls, after all, and high ground. But every plan unravels on the same question. Who has the authority to decide? One of the older warriors, once a commander under Attila, tries to calm the panic. He raises a hand and speaks in a slow, clear voice. But it only makes things worse. His age, once a sign of wisdom, now reads as hesitation. A younger man challenges him outright. Another mutters about the time being wasted, how Attila never would have waited this long. The older man goes quiet and walks away. No one stops him. The villa itself seems to respond to the unrest. The once inviting archways feel exposed now, vulnerable. The mosaics underfoot, once admired, now just reflect nervous pacing. Fires are lit not for comfort, but for watch points. Horses are brought into the inner courtyard, hooves clattering across marble. Some men begin barricading the entryways with furniture. Others sharpen blades, the rhythmic rasp of stone against steel, filling the air like a warning bell no one dares to name aloud. And still, no one attacks. The supposed force from the hills never arrives. Not that day, not the next, but the damage is done. The real enemy turns out to be the unease itself. A creeping realization takes hold that maybe the Romans aren't coming, but something has shifted forever. The peace, if it ever was peace, was fragile, a thin crust of routine over a boiling core of fear and ambition. And now, the crust has cracked. Tensions mount. Old grudges resurface. A scuffle breaks out near the bathhouse over a waterskin. Another over a horse saddle. Small things. Petty things. But they're signs. Splinters in the bones. The laughter in the garden is gone. The fig tree that once offered shade now stands over empty benches. The bathhouse echoes with silence. No longer steam and soft conversation. Men sleep with blades again, even in the sun. The officials from the nearby village haven't returned. Not even with bribes. They've likely heard the rumors and stayed away. By the fifth day, it's clear the villa is no longer a gathering place. It's a trap with nice tiles. Some men have already left, quietly, in twos and threes, slipping out with only what they can carry. No ceremony, no farewells. Others pretend not to notice. A small group begins gathering horses under cover of dusk, not bothering to explain. Those who remain don't stop them. They only watch, tired and unsure. And you, like many others, find yourself staring at the hills more than the road now. Not looking for Romans, just looking for an exit. The shadows stretch longer through the columns. The villa creaks in the wind. Somewhere, someone sings a battle song, too softly to be defiant. Just enough to be remembered. By nightfall, the courtyard is quieter than it's ever been. No arguing, no strategies. Just the low murmur of packing, the occasional scrape of gear against stone, and the flicker of torchlight on faces that have aged a decade in a day. This wasn't a battle, not a siege, not a conquest, but in the villa's shadows, something broke. Not a wall, not a man, something older, quieter. The idea that this place might have been a turning point, a home, a breath between storms. Now, it's just another pause before the scattering begins. Tomorrow, riders will leave in all directions, some toward the rivers, some toward the plains, some toward towns they barely believe still stand. There will be no ceremony, no farewell, and the villa will return to silence, its shadows deeper now, its walls heavier with the memories of men who once thought they could rest here. The villa wakes before the sun rises, not because of urgency, but because of a quiet, collective understanding, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken. You feel it before you even open your eyes, the sound of boots moving across stone, the clink of gear being packed not for patrol, but for departure. Outside, the air is colder than usual, not in temperature, but in presence. It's the absence of smoke from the morning fires, the lack of conversation in the corridor, the simple realization that the house, once loud with life, is now growing hollow by the hour. From the archway, you can see figures already disappearing down the old Roman road. Small, staggered groups, some mounted, some on foot, the last of their belongings strapped to the backs of tired horses. There are no banners, no formation. They don't look like warriors now. They look like travelers, like refugees. And maybe, for the first time, they are. These are not the men who stormed cities under Attila's command. These are the remnants, the fragments of a force that no longer has a center. The garden, once tended with a strange kind of reverence, has turned brittle. Fig leaves curl and drop without notice. The wild herbs have overgrown the edges of the pathways. The grapevines sag from the trellis, heavy with fruit that no one harvests anymore. Bees no longer hum near the cracked fountains. Instead, wind moves through the broken pergola beams, stirring up dust and discarded olive pits. The old bench beneath the laurel tree is empty now, save for a forgotten waterskin left behind by someone in too much of a hurry. Inside the villa, only a few remain. They speak in low tones, mostly out of habit, not necessity. A few elders lean against the columns of the main hall, watching the fire flicker in the brazier that someone still bothers to tend. Not out of comfort, but because letting it go out feels like giving up completely. The walls of the great room still hold the soot marks from past torches, the cracks spreading a little more each day, like veins along a weary face. No one mentions it, but everyone sees. You wander past a window and pause at the sight of a man dragging a chest across the tiled floor. One wheel broken, scraping all the way. Inside are coins, trinkets, a few Roman scrolls, some brass trimmings. Things once taken as prizes of conquest, now just burdens. He huffs, wipes his forehead, and sits beside it. Not guarding it, just waiting. You watch for a moment longer, then move on. Beyond the outer gate, the road stretches out like a frayed rope unraveling into the hills. That road once meant access, power. It was how Rome maintained its grip across continents. But now, it seems too long, too exposed. Cracks run through the old paving stones. Grass grows between them. A milestone lies toppled on its side, its inscription worn into gibberish. A bird perches on it, quiet, watching the horizon the way sentries used to. There is no enemy in sight. No army appears from the trees. No Roman force comes sweeping in to reclaim their land. The threat was never about what might arrive. It was about what no longer holds. The real fear isn't that the enemy will knock on the door. It's that no one will. That the world you thought had order, even if only in brutality, is slipping into something else. A quiet sort of disintegration. You pass a storeroom where salted meat used to be kept. It's empty now. Only dust and the smell of old brine remain. Beside it, someone's left behind a ledger. Its ink faded, pages warped by damp. Names of men who once followed a chain of command. Inventories, lists of spoils. Even a record of which garden plots grew which herbs. You flip through it slowly, half curious, half mourning something you hadn't realized could be mourned. Then, from the hills, a returning scout arrives with nothing to report. Again, just more empty towns, a burnt field, a temple looted by someone else. The empire is there, yes, but not in the way the maps once claimed. It exists in pieces now. Cities still call themselves Rome, but their loyalties have fractured. Some look east, others west. Some elect their own leaders now. Governors disappear and are replaced without ceremony. Towns pay taxes to whichever power shows up first. The borders that once ran across the land in clean, red lines are now smudged and uncertain. Even the locals have changed. Those who once trembled at the sound of hoofbeats now stand still, arms crossed, waiting to see if you'll pass through or stay. They no longer see a Hun and think of a monster. They see a man who looks just as uncertain, just as worn as they are. Fear has given way to fatigue, and fatigue, eventually, becomes indifference. You return to the main hall that evening to find someone has drawn a new map in the dust on the floor. Not a Roman map, something smaller, less elegant. The lines are uneven. The borders are guesses. No one claims it's official. It's just one man's version of what still works. A few others gather around it, pointing to rivers, landmarks, old trading posts that might still be open. They aren't planning a campaign. They're planning routes to safety, places where food might still be found, places where the roads don't vanish into the brush. The fire in the hall burns low, and no one stokes it. The conversation is hushed. For the first time, the sound of sharpening blades has stopped. Not because they're ready, but because it no longer seems like weapons are the answer to anything. No one knows what is. That night, you lie beneath the open sky in the garden. The stars are bright, brighter than they ever were on campaign. You try to remember how the constellations looked from the saddle, from the edges of Roman strongholds, from the heart of the plains where the wind never stopped. But it all feels farther away, now, like another lifetime. Above you, the mosaic of the lion and the deer is barely visible in the dim light. The lion's head has chipped away, but the deer remains. legs still outstretched, frozen in flight. You stare at it for a long time, wondering if it was finished before the villa began to crumble, wondering if the artist knew what would happen to this place, wondering if the deer will still be here long after you're gone. Somewhere behind the stables, a dog barks, then silence again. You sit up and look to the horizon, where the hills meet the sky in a haze of gray blue. You imagine the road beyond the trees, the old towns barely clinging to memory, the rivers that once marked provinces. Somewhere out there, others are doing the same, watching, waiting, walking. There are no orders anymore, no great vision, just fragments scattered across the landscape like broken tiles from the villa's floor. And that's where we'll leave this long, slow unraveling. The riders have gone, the fires are cold, the walls are quiet. The empire still stands, technically, but it doesn't speak with one voice anymore. The road continues, but the pavement cracks a little more each day. Now, let's leave this place behind. Let the shadows stretch long over the colonnades. Let the garden grow wild again, and let the footsteps fade from the dusty hall. The world still turns, but the center has drifted. And somewhere in that silence, sleep waits. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the smoky camps beneath Hun banners to the crumbling villas at the empire's edge. From river burials whispered through reeds to forgotten tombs hidden beneath layers of earth and rumor. A long, slow walk through the dusty crossroads where conquest met collapse. If you're still awake, thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the boiled meat and the broken statues, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole point. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly dive into history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. It's always lovely seeing where in the world these late-night journeys are finding their quiet homes. For now, I'll let the campfires burn low. The distant war drums fall silent, and the marble halls echo softly one last time. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.